All right. Anything now? It's telling me I'm live. Okay, it's up. I've seen two people online. Um, hey, welcome people. Hopefully, I can get more people in on the session. Boy, let me just type in the thing right here. Huh? Okay, I seeing Okay, I'll give you all 5 minutes. In the meantime, I see. Oh yeah, okay. I see 6 people up. 6 people up on now. Wow, that's real cool. Um, yeah. In the meantime, you could type in your little comments on the side there, right? So that I will basically use that as the attendance, and hopefully anybody who didn't is not online for this particular session. Once you've seen the video and you can tell me, you can email me and tell me I have seen the video, then I'll count that as an attendance. According to the attendance here, we have 4 more sessions. Well, 3 more sessions after today, right? Hi, Anissa. Hi, Danae. Hi, Clyde. Hi, Donna, sorry. Juliana, Ariana, Timothy, Danae. Well done. God bless you all. Thank you for coming in. So grateful that you guys can come in. Um, Extremely grateful. Who's JJ? Aldiana Reyes. Present. Okay. Mark Prasad. How y'all doing? How y'all doing this evening? All right, Lindy's here. Christina's here as well. Got 12 people now. That's quite good, actually. Shavana. All right, thank you. Okay. So while we're waiting, just I was trying to do a diagram because I can't put up slides and stuff like that. But I was trying to do a diagram, and it looks terrible on the camera. So what I'll have to do is I'll have to put in a diagram later on as a means of following up what I talk about today. Who's Mace Flower? I mean, people have some names, have some names there. I mean, I don't know who is who sometimes. Okay, Leah, thank you. Right. So we have 14 people on right now. Um, no, why are you? Yeah, Chloe's here. Great, thank you, Chloe. Um, I really don't know how. Like I said, this is a first time effort on my part. I didn't know that. I thought I could send a private link, and apparently I have to go public. But I mean, it's public just with y'all, right? There's nobody else here is not supposed to be here, right? What I'm trying to do, Timothy was very kind to send me some pictures of when y'all went to National Gallery, and I'll be actually referring to some of those pictures, as I said in the preview video, a couple of days ago, when we were talking about a little bit more about Casabon in depth. What I was trying to show is that, in particular, I'll hopefully get really into the lecture by about 5:15 now. It's 5:12 right now. But Trinidad's art line, if I have to do a timeline of it, say from about 1820 to 1850. So I'm just looking down as I'm writing the diagram. And then all the way up to roughly about 1930. I'm trying to do Trinidad on one side and the rest of the world which means primarily the mainstream art scene in Europe and so on the other side. If you can see this, like I said, I'll do a much better version of this in so from about 1820, which is down here, to roughly 1850, right? We have Bridgens, who was coming out of neoclassicism and Romanticism. You see that, right? So that's actually showing back to front, which is the worst, a total waste of time, right? But I'm saying that roughly from about 1820, so say let's say a little bit earlier, about 1840, Bridgens was the main focus on Trinidad's art, right? And Bridgens was mostly trained in the neoclassical and romanticism school of thought, right? Which, because of its very neoclassicism, remember, has some very strict orders to it. And because of that kind of strictness in neoclassicism, there was a real need. She needs to go here, great. It's not reversed. Okay, it's showing reverse on my camera. Sorry, so that's why. Right? So what I'm saying is that if it's not reversed and you can see it, so roughly from about 1820 to about 1840, right? We have Bridgens, and Bridgens is trained in that very rigid, uptight, neoclassical kind of thing that, one thing must be one way and something else must be another way, right? And because of that, there's a need to show who were people who were obviously the lower classes, who were the labor class. Right? By this time, you have the indentured laborers and the slaves, because this is still roughly before emancipation of 1838, right? Well, 1834 to 1838, right? So roughly before that time, you have this kind of very rigid distinction between the colonial class and the working class. And because of that reason, when you pull up images of Bridgens, that I'll probably post up later as a means of showing like a post-class analysis, right? You will see that kind of rigidity in the sense that, plantation people are normal, plantation owners, the high-class people are normal, and the slaves and the indentured servants are supposed to be demeaned, are supposed to be represented in a different, albeit inferior manner than the white plantation class, right? So that very sharp distinction, that very sharp rigidity is something that is, very, very clear in the work of Bridgens. It's almost the point that he shows African people as being caricaturized. And there's a particular piece by Bridgens called, Negro Heads, that he does portraits of people from the neck up. And, they're meant to be shown, in chains, as, having the stereotypical, bad features. They're made to look ugly. They're made to look unattractive. They're made to look, just simply not being represented in a positive light, right? They're made to be almost like, the stereotypical way of how racists tend to show African people, exaggerate certain facial features and stuff like that. Those things are done deliberately by Bridgens because I can't really say it's not his fault, but it's really through his training and through his mindset that he had adhered to. And of course, Casabon is very different. Casabon, although he grew up, and you'll see from his biographical data, he grew up in a relatively affluent family, and went to do medicine out of all things in England, and quit that, and then went to France, went to the Barbizon area in France, and became an artist, and returned to Trinidad as an artist, right? But Casabon himself was not pure white. Casabon was a member of the mulatto class. So even by his very nature, his physical nature, Casabon had a connection with people who were not white, right? And obviously, like I said before, combined with the mindset of the Barbizon school, which he was trained in, right? Casabon was trained through the examples of people like Millet, that, there was a need from that school of painting to represent the lowest level of society as valid and reasonable subjects of artwork, right? And there was a need to represent them not only as they really physically were, but also to show them to present, to utilize visual devices like portraiture, like composition, like chiaroscuro, or the color, like linear perspective, right? To encourage them to apply those artistic principles that were originally reserved for the portraiture of the upper class. I just want to ask something. So let me show. Can you hear me properly? That's what I want to make sure, because as I'm saying this thing, I could just be gesticulating on the screen and nothing coming out, right? Okay, thank you, Anissa. Right? So keep those things in mind. Those things are very, very important, because those concepts of applying the devices, the visual devices and techniques of realism to the lower class people is something that is very, very important, because it's something that will carry through, right? Throughout, it will carry through in the development of European art, and will also kind of persist in our art, literally to the point of the present day, right? This whole thing about bigging up or lifting up those who are on the lower levels of society. Okay. Now, what I was trying to show in the diagram, and you'll tell me it's not reversed. It should reverse on my camera, but it's not reversed on yours. Is that roughly, from this time to 1840, we have Bridgens, right? And then comes Casabon around 1850 to about 1880. Where do you have to mean this thing? Because he dies in the year 1888. So roughly from about 1850 to 1880, we have Casabon. And we have realism. Right? So I'm just doing this diagram to show, and I'm not very scribbly, but you have, so roughly after Bridgens, we have Casabon from about 1840, 1850, thereabouts, to about 1880, right? And what you have in Casabon is that realist style, basically, of the landscape, of the people, of the portraiture. And I will dare to say that the realism carries on all the way in Trinidad art to about 1930, to roughly 1930s, right? Unlike the rest of Europe that undergoes this, it has the parallels between European art still exist up to about the 1880s. So in European art, you also have neoclassicism and romanticism, kind of scribbling out, and you have realism. Right, in the European side, just a bit bigger, right? But very quickly onwards from that, from about the 1870s or so, you're gonna have all the isms in Europe starting to burst on the scene, and while all these isms are taking place over here, you really have a continuation, not much going on here in Trinidad's art, right? So, going from Impressionism. And you have post-impressionism. Right? Then you have essentially the big one, which is Cubism. And you have Dadaism. And you have abstract expressionism. So you have expressionism, sorry. And then abstract expressionism. So I'll give you all the time, just look at the diagram, because I'm scribbling this down. And so what I'm trying to basically show is that while all this stuff is going on this side in Europe, ain't nothing happening on our side. Well, I can't say nothing happening, but with more or less one particular school of thought that is more or less just permeating through this timeline here up to the 1930s, while over here is a whole set of things going on, right? And that is part of like I said, the dilemma of Trinidadian art. That it is really it really has like a big vacuum after Cassabon is gone, and I don't know if that vacuum because of that vacuum or for other reasons, but a lot of the conservative aspects of our art still very much remain today. Even though we have all this other type of art going on, we have the conceptual art going on and stuff like that, the persistence of conservative reliance on realism, right, still remains with us to this day. Most people, if you talk about patronage for art, most people would prefer to buy a landscape or a portrait as opposed to something, really far out or really avant-garde, like a performance piece or some kind of radical kind of, pop art or something like that, right? It is just simply how the market is being trained to think. And we have to kind of wonder, to sort of step back a little bit sometimes and wonder and take a little bit more introspection, a little bit more of an introspective look to kind of wonder why our art is the way it is. So if you start doing some kind of very conceptual thing, chances are that it's only going to be received within a relatively small clique of people, as opposed to if you do a really beautiful landscape or a really beautiful, wonderful portrait. People are going to say ooh and ah, and most likely they will rush to buy your work a lot faster than something a little bit more edgy and possibly more creative. Now, there is a video that I will post up later, and it's called Banker's Guide to Art. Right? It's a BBC documentary done not so long ago, but in that documentary, and I'll put the exact timeline, the exact time of it. So I'll make a note of that right now. Right? Is the issue of collecting art and pricing art, because you have to keep in mind we're looking at this history now. So we're looking not just at the artwork itself, but at the patronage and who is buying the artwork, right? Like I said before, in the case of Cassabon, the patronage was quite clear in terms of in the case of Cassabon, right? He was he was supported by the aristocracy. So apart from the governor, Lord Harris, right, there were other plantation owners, right, people with money who were able to afford his work. I know how much he charged, but it was obviously enough for him to live quite comfortably, at least for a while, right? In France, however, the competition, quite frankly, was very, very cutthroat. The salons that I spoke about, these big exhibition halls, then it's kind of hard to imagine if you can imagine a National Museum, but not with paintings nicely put up, on the wall where everybody could see properly, right? The salons were literally jam-packed with paintings from floor to ceiling. So you had to do very, very spectacular and very, off-the-cuff kind of work to get noticed. And that was the reason why Courbet, it sort of propelled people like Courbet. And I hope that you'll have seen the artist studio, the painter studio by Gustave Courbet. Have you all seen that? I just put that question out to you. If you haven't, I will put that link up as well too, because I had put that link up in the video and in the classroom link. And it's something you need to see because one, the painting is massive. Apart from it being this number of feet tall, it is extremely wide, right? Wow, everybody's no. Wow, okay, oh boy. But you need to see that painting because of the scale of it, right? And what was really, really important, and another important thing to keep in mind, and as I have said, but I really have to kind of drill that point home, is that Courbet was a real rebel. He was a real, arrogant. Yes, at least you're honest. Yeah, no problem about that. But please see the video. I will put a link to that video. It's only 10 minutes long, right? Please see that video so that you get an understanding of the image. Because what it is basically like, it's Courbet sitting at his easel in the middle doing his wonderful painting, and you have a nude figure next to him, right? Sort of leaning kind of suggestively at him, right? And then all these other things going on, who could be models, who could be spectators, who could be artists, who could be fellow artists and stuff like that, right? And what I was trying to say is that the important thing, as good as that painting is, or was, or is, right? That painting was rejected by the Academy. It was rejected by Academy because the subject matter at that time, remember, we're coming out of the neoclassic, which we're coming in that transition from and a lot of people still have that kind of rigid mindset of a neoclassical school of thinking. So coming out of that mindset, there was this very, very hard and steadfast rule that you cannot paint ordinary people on such a massive scale. And that is why the work was rejected by the Academy. So according to Courbet at his time, right? This is about in the mid 1800s, right? According to Courbet at this time, the Academy was out of touch with reality, right? And his painting is a masterfully executed painting, so that it is not taking the artistic aspects into consideration. It is just strictly adhering to what he now believes is a old and archaic and irrelevant rule. The reason why I mentioned this before is because Casabon never, from what at least what we know, Casabon never painted artwork to be rejected. Okay, Casabon painted work that would obviously comply or be in line with what his patronage wanted, right? And so that for that reason, Casabon's work remains very visually appealing. And it is nothing is meant to shock you, nothing is meant to offend you, nothing is meant to throw you off. There's another painting by Courbet. I'll put the painting up. It's called The Origin of the World. I don't know if anybody know about that painting by Gustave Courbet. Anyone? It's called The Origin of the World by Gustave Courbet. Done when he was much younger. Not seeing any responses at all. Okay. Xavier said yes. Anissa said yes. We have seen it, so it's you'll know what's about. A particularly provocative image. It's basically yes. I showed it to Anissa. Right. It is basically an image of a woman's private parts. Right. Like that would be more something that a gynecologist would be accustomed to seeing, rather than an artist. Right. And of course, that painting still remains quite controversial even to this day, because it shows the female anatomy, in full detail, right? And it also shows it also, in a sense, some might say it dehumanizes the female figure, because all it shows is that one part and nothing else. Like, right? Yeah, Shavana. Yeah, just researched it, right? So you can see that Courbet was a really hardcore provocateur, right? And he wanted to, disturb. He wanted to rock the boat. He wanted to, upset people. He wanted to, give people a hard time. He wanted to show that, he's an artist, and no matter what the subject matter was, right, that his artistic skill and his ability to render something was what mattered, right? So for that reason, you have Courbet, but you see in Casabon, like I said, Casabon, on the other hand, remained, very inoffensive. Like I said, the only controversial image, and I would say it's arguably controversial, is when the building that was in Red House, or the former administrative building, was set on fire during the riots. Casabon did an image, a rendering, a depiction of that as a historical record, and that's the only real image to show that Casabon was trying to show something out of the ordinary. He was trying to show a traumatic event. He was trying to show, what obviously is a difficult event, right? But for the rest of the time, it's portraiture and it's landscapes, and they're done, like I said, they're the landscapes and seascapes, and they're done, in relatively um, a benign way, in the sense that not even the lighting is excessively dramatic. You will just see, it's not say that you would even see the person being shown at sunrise or at sunset. It's mostly in the middle of the day. The sky is nice and blue. The clouds are there. A few clouds, and the vegetation is all nice and lush. And the people are shown in a relaxed pose, or they're being shown in the typical realist way, very, very, very far in distance, right? So that they almost become part of the landscape rather than being a subject that the people are the subject. In the case when you had a landscape, if people were in the landscape, they were more part of the landscape. If it was a portrait, then you had a close up, right, like this, but you had a close up, but it was just simply the focus is on the person. Might have a little smile, might be off the side, nothing really out of the ordinary, right? It's saying exactly the same, right? So keep that in mind. I can't stop people going to the washroom, man. Oh God, Mark, you're killing me. You're killing me. Okay. All right. There's not. Yeah, a couple of things as well too. As we just on this thing, doing with this format, right? Just remember that because of video, and it's a video that will be posted up for later reference, you're entitled to obviously go through the video and fast forward, rewind it. Yes. Good evening, Gabriela. Right? Yeah. So what I'm saying is that sorry, just as a little aside, that the video is there. This format is obviously different. I don't have. It's a pity I don't have cards or slides to pop up behind me right here to show things. Or I can't even add images to the live chat. There's something a bit of a disadvantage. As a little housekeeping note, tomorrow Yuri is holding a seminar for lecturers to do his whole online thing. Right? Right. You can also pause it as well too. Right? So that you can pause, rewind if you didn't want, if you want, or you can type in the feed or email me later to say, well, at this particular timeline, I want you to clarify certain things. Right? This is what is most important. Okay. But just keep in mind that the timeline, like I said before. So I said, particularly, I know Scribble is saying quite illegibly, but all his actions going right here in Europe in the late 19th, early 20th century, and you more or less have a continuation of realism on the Trinidad side. Okay, and that pretty much applies to most of the Caribbean as well, with a few exceptions. With the two major exceptions being Haiti and Cuba, which I will probably get into in another session. Right. Right. So, any other questions, any other feedback as we're moving along? Okay. Right. Well, Timothy was kind enough to give me about. I don't know if all of you all went to the National Gallery, but Timothy took some images, about 6 images roughly. That I will share with you all as well too, on the landscapes of Casablanca. And there's a particular image that I find a little bit almost comical, but worth talking about. And that is there's a portrait of a toddler, right? And the way it's shown, obviously, it's distorted. It's distorted in a very, lack of a better word, almost get like a Hello Kitty kind of way. Again, to show that this is what Casablanca was into. He was creating nice images that pleased his clients. Basically, his customers, his supporters, people who purchase his art, right? And the real thing is that what is particularly sad about Casablanca is that eventually that patronage kind of tapers off, as Lord Harris, moves on to England, gets reassigned, and the island becomes, starts to change administration and stuff like that, particularly after we have these changes taking place in terms of the so what's the would commission determine the subject matter of Casablanca or is it based on its own free will? That's what I'm trying to say, Carmelita. I'm trying to say that most of the time the commission, the support of the artwork, right, determined his subject matter. more or less. So I said that Casablanca, what I'm trying to show is a certain irony going on, that despite being trained in a style of French painting that we now know was had very, very significant anti-authoritarian aspects to that style he was trained in, right? But when it comes back to Trinidad, the those subtle anti-authoritarian elements in the work, while they exist in terms of the subject matter as far as representing the people, as far as how the people were being represented, right? There's a different motive to representing them in the Trinidad context. And let me try to explain that a little bit. When Millet was showing the gleaners, they're showing these three women bent down, picking up the scraps from the harvest, right? He's trying to show that, these people are as, he was making a statement, these people are as important as everybody else, right? But when he started to show images of, beautiful East Indian laborers, or beautiful mulatto woman, or beautiful African woman, right? Who is a laborer. You have to kind of stop and think back. Well, is it that revolutionary in the Trinidadian context? Okay, so while an image of putting a black woman in a portrait may be controversial in Europe, it may not be so controversial in the Caribbean, because this is a very much a part of Caribbean life. And you also have to think about plantation owners may have wanted these images because they show a certain type of exoticism, and they show a certain type of dominance still. Because if I have a portrait of somebody who works for me, right, then that's an extension of my authority, my power. I provide for this person. I provide a wage to this person, right? This person is part of my quote unquote family, so to speak. Right? So there's a very different, like I said, same subject matter, but different contexts. Does that answer your question, Carmelita? And it's something that in Caribbean arts is a very, very important thing to keep in mind. Same images, same iconography, but because of that different context, it has a different meaning and different consequences. Right. I'm hoping that has answered the question, because it's a very serious point that needs to be carried through. And you're going to see it over and over and over again. Is representing a black person, in a portrait, demeaning the black person, or is it elevating the black person? Right? It's very, very subjective now. In the like I said, in the French school, it is clear it is elevating the person. But in a West Indian school, with West Indian context, it is very, very subjective, right? And that's another thing that you have to keep on mind. So this is where things get kind of, a little bit ticklish, because same images, when I say same images, same technique, right? Same pose, same color, same composition, same everything, right? Even the same person, but it'll mean one thing in one context, in a European context, and it means something totally different in a Caribbean context. The other thing I want to drive home is this whole issue of the plantation, right? The plantation, because all these images essentially come from plant. They're meant to satisfy plantation owners. Who does love love there? Anyway, and that is something that's in a lot of our intellectual writing, intellectual reasoning throughout the mid 20th century and further on. That is something that's another theme that prevails, right? This whole notion of the island or the island state as being the plantation, as being a big plantation. And in some ways, when Damian Marley has his song, the old slave mill is grinding still. This is what is referred to. In some ways, slavery is still going on. It might have a different name. It might have different politicians. It might have different governmental names, governmental structures. But in some ways, slavery is still continuing. And the oppression that we experienced during slavery is still going on today. There's a thing about, like the plantation culture, for example. One example is that, you still, and it's something that what people joke about, but in some ways it's very serious. You can't have a party without food in our society. Or if you have a gathering and you want people to leave, well, when you give out the food is when people eat and pick up and eat and then go, right? So a lot of those customs still remain with us today, and that's why the whole idea of a plantation authority or plantation economy is something that has remained in us. And in some ways, with the images of Casabon, we have plantation aesthetics, right? And what's it Xavier saying? I have to stand. Okay, I understand that. Right. We have, and you might see, for example, Lloyd Best literally talk about as an economist. He talked about the plantocracy, right? About the government being a plantocracy, which means a administration of plantation owners, right? And like I said, a lot of what you will do in your critical readings courses and later on, there's still this whole idea of the plantation continuing even up to today. And like I said before, Casabon's work is very much a plantation aesthetic in some people's opinion. I'm not just opinion because it's not necessarily a hard and proven fact, right? And the other thing you have to keep in mind, again, is who, apart from the patronage, apart from who is buying these works of art on the part of Casabon, is the fact that the people, on one side, you may say, well, Casabon is elevating the non-whites, right? He is using the artistic treatment and applying artistic treatments to them in order to elevate them. But the other question you have to ask is, did these same people who he depicted and who he represented, did these same people ever see his artwork? Right? That's me. You have to be very clear. Did they go up to them and say, "Hey, I did this picture of you. What do you think of it?" I don't think so. And the reason why I don't think so, because no indentured slave or liberated indentured slave, for that matter, ever owned a Casabon painting. Right? Most of them were kept either by the governor, and a lot of that collection went to England after he left. And that's why it's like, and again, that's why I say the Casabon, the greatest collection of Casabon work is still called the Lord Harris collection in England, right? And then you have some families here, some who are obviously descended from the plantation class, who may have had a few of his examples knocking around, and those people then passed on the work or sold the work, right, within our art market here, in order to perpetuate, in order to make Casabon popular. Another thing, there is a book by this art historian called Jeffrey McLean. It was written in 1986, and it's a book on Casabon, and it is in the West Indiana section of the Heritage Library, which I was hoping to show you, right? And that book is really a form of centering, in the sense that it is refocusing the center or the real beginning of Trinidadian art on Casabon. And the reason why I'm saying that is for that reason. Long after Casabon's death, and well, I would say actually before, Casabon actually died in relative obscurity, because he tried to move to Martinique after his patronage kind of declined in Trinidad. He picked the family, went to Martinique, tried to make a living there, and didn't quite succeed, and then came back to Trinidad, and spent the rest of his life, sadly to say, in quite obscure poverty. And they said he literally died in front of his canvas, and was buried, in a public cemetery. Only recently, in the last 10 years or so, they've actually refurbished and rebuilt a monument around that cemetery, around that cemetery plot, to celebrate Casabon. But coming down to the end of Casabon's life, he was relatively unpopular, right? Because he did not get the kind of support that he was getting before. And he wasn't really changing his artwork, I guess, the tastes of later generations of people. right? And or that artwork wasn't so hot. Yes, commentators mentioned Margaret Mann, and I mentioned Margaret Mann because I had mentioned in the previous video, and this is a real problem we have in Trinidadian art. People who Margaret Mann was a wife of an aristocrat who was trained by Casabo. But like I said before, there was no real direct successor to Casabo after Casabo died in 1888. So Margaret Mann actually left Trinidad in the 1850s. And there's a book, and I will pull a picture of me showing it up because where I am right now, I don't have the book with me. But it's something called The Letters of Margaret Mann. And if you were to have been fortunate to have visited the National Gallery about, say, 10 years ago, a lot of the images was actually called, the section was actually called the Casabo-Mann collection, right? So the work was so similar that you couldn't, unless you really indicated, was actually, overtly indicated whose work it was. You couldn't really tell, on a glance, which work belonged to Casabo and which work belonged to Margaret Mann. She painted exactly like him, right? I think her colors were a little bit brighter, but that was really about it. You couldn't really tell any significant difference between the work, right? Which sort of insinuates as well too that Casabo painted people to train people, to paint like him. He didn't say, well, you have you can do that, you can do something else, right? It's very clear that Casabo painted in a very, very strict certain way. And whoever was trained under him also followed that very strict, rigid way as well, right? But unfortunately, there was no real successor to Casabo. So there wasn't something to carry on his legacy, so to speak. But despite that, so apart from no successor, you have very, very few examples of Trinidadian art in that period, from about 1888 to about 1930. Right? There's one image, I think, on the Citizens for Conservation website that was done about 1900. It's called Nudes at Macarip. Right? I mean, it's just the backs of two women lying, reclining, and the bay in the background. It doesn't really even look convincingly like Macarip Bay, because everybody knows what Macarip Bay looks like. And I think even Casabo, the representation of Macarip Bay, is actually more accurate than in that painting. So you really have to think that during this gap, what is really happening to Trinidad art, and there's no record of it, and I can't think that after Casabo dropped dead that everybody magically just stopped supporting art or stopped doing art, but there is no record of it until you have this group called the Society of Independence that comes up in the 1930s, right? And these people obviously are, again, they're from, even though they engage in art, they're from well-to-do classes, right? They're not from people who's fronting. So there are people who engage in art, and there are people who want to, and as the Art Society rightfully says, I have the information for that. They wanted to revel. Now that was the exact word used, to revel and enjoy, the avant-garde work of Picasso and stuff like that, right? So they wanted to get into like Cubism and Fauvism that was more loose, more open, more not so uptight style of painting. But at the same time, are they merely copying? Are they just simply looking at what's going on in Europe and simply emulating what is going on in Europe? And that's another question you have to ask. Is our visual representation of so-called avant-garde styles, is it just simply us following fashion, rather than really getting into the nitty-gritty of what something is? And the reason why I'm mentioning that is because, you have the case of Wilfredo Lam. You have the case of somebody who was a protege of Picasso, who met Aimé Césaire directly. And if you know who Aimé Césaire is a poet from Martinique, who created this concept of what's called negritude. And negritude is a concept, is a philosophy that anybody with an African heritage, whether you're, mixed, or whether you're pure African, or whether you're part African, right? So that anybody who has some degree of African ancestry in him or her has a direct link to Africa, both in terms of geography, in terms of biology, in terms of philosophy, in terms of everything. You are African, right? And to give a biological metaphor is saying that Africa is the taproot, that you have this plant of people, and Africa is the taproot, right? That will obviously change later on because you'll have the one drop rule, exactly, earlier, the one drop rule. That's a very good way of putting it, right? I mean, my mother's Chinese and my father was mixed as well too. So I'm actually half red, half Chinese. So yeah. And with Full Lam, in the case of Full Lam, his mother was black, was Cuban, was a black Cuban, and his father was Chinese. But his mother, apart from being, just she wasn't any typical black Cuban, she was also a priestess in their version of Obia, which is called Santeria. And what he was saying in this image called the jungle is that he became very incensed that Afro-Cubans and mulattoes didn't want to associate with each other at all. And he was particularly angry that, the mulattoes, because they were lighter in their complexion, didn't want to associate with the Africans, with the Afro-Cubans so much. And, it's this image. So he's trying to show like a sense of omnipresence that throughout the entire landscape, there is this African spirituality that is omnipresent. It's always there, right? And again, he's sort of making a reference to the plantation as well too, because you have the in the image is like a scissors, something in there is like a scissors showing agriculture, the presence of agriculture, but showing that despite the presence of that agriculture, that the African spirituality is what affects everybody, and it's very it's very pervasive, it's very integrated in the thing. You cannot tell the society, the spirituality from the natural landscape. Right? And it's very sexual as well too, with the exaggerated breasts and the buttocks and the feet of the figures, along with their faces that are carved to look like African masks, right? Compare that image to another image by Picasso, and I'll write the name out for you. It's called Les Demoiselles. And have no fear because I'll definitely put this up. Les Demoiselles d'Avignon is an early painting by, sorry, I'm going to put it up a little bit faster, a little bit longer so that you could see. Elias, that's Elias, Demoiselles, D'Avignon. It's a very nice title, but the image is of a woman in a Cuban style, right? The faces obviously resembling African masks. But d'Avignon is an area in France. It was like the red light district in France. You have Mauritius and Woodbrook, which is, you had d'Avignon in France. So basically it was saying that Les Demoiselles d'Avignon was women in a brothel. Right? And that made the title of the painting alone made people freak out. Okay? And this is why, people tend to make the really, kind of knee-jerk reaction that anything African, anything sexual is controversial and provocative and almost sinful. I'll give you, and just to get a little bit more of a divergent thing, right? You all know about rock and roll music. Well, you may know of headbanging and heavy metal music, right? But when rock and roll first started to emerge in the 1950s, it was very, very controversial. And it was very controversial because of its affiliation with black people. You may not know that rock and rolling was a slang term in African American parlance for having sex, right? And so rock and roll music was obviously music for that, and it became very, very controversial. Was considered to be very taboo, right? And in that same way, the Picasso image, right, was considered to be taboo because it's obviously dealing with African things and the dark side of humanity. It's kind of nonsense. right? And added to that, it's Wilfredo Lamb was saying that when he was painting the jungle, people would pass outside his studio and say that he's painting the devil, or it's kind of, and who, he's painting demons and stuff like that and all this kind of thing. But he wasn't really doing that. But I think even the artists kind of enjoyed that type of provocation, because it showed that the arts could, make people, still people's emotions, and still people's responses, and create a real passionate response, which I think ultimately what that's what the artists were trying for. But they were also aiming for a connection, in the sense that from a European standpoint, I keep on saying they were showing a kind of pluralism. And I keep on saying, again, the issue of context, because you have very similar images in the Wilfredo Lamb painting. But because Caribbean, there is a need here to emphasize that, remember, Lamb is also part African, right? So it's trying to say that, look, I am getting in touch with my African, genealogy. I'm trying to get into who I am. I'm trying to get into with part of my identity, right? You always have a thing that we were, through colonialism, our language, our identity, everything was taken from us, right? So now that we are engaging in Cubism, Cubism is in a sense us rediscovering ourselves and reasserting ourselves through art back for everybody to see. Does everybody get that? I want to make sure everybody get us it. In Picasso's thing, it was just simply, well, this is another way of seeing. This is another way of representing, right? And in applying Cubism to the Caribbean aspect, the Caribbean context, sorry, there is a need to try to assert there's not simply another way of seeing, there's another way of showing who we are. Right? So another part of our identity, us getting back into our identity, us in a sense empowering our identity. Right? And that's very important, because again, the work of Leroy Clark is very much about that. And I'll get into that hopefully very soon. Right? There's actually a specific narrative. I pity that I can't show you all Minshaw's River. I have a DVD of it, because the YouTube version is very, very poor in sort of quality, but it's still watchable, and it's still like I said, in 6 parts. And I really want you all to familiarize yourselves with it. I'm not putting up the videos just for style. I'll try and put the videos and then put up a very specific point in the timeline where you can fast forward to, where you could see the video without having to suffer through the entire thing. Because what I'm aiming to get is obviously certain relevant points, certain key points in the video, right, that pertain to this course and that pertain to the issues that we're discussing, right? Now, the issue of the isms, like I said, I will have to highlight them very much in a lot of detail. I'm going to show this again, because everybody, like I said, I have to write this down. Those of you who didn't see this before, I know I just scribbled this thing while I was doing it, but I have to write it down for you all, right? Make a nice chart and everything, right? But the real issue here is that we have to sort of see our art, and then our art versus the rest of the art in the world, and try to see where the similarities and differences are, and also try to gauge, and to some degree, that you have certain peaks and valleys as far as the interest. If I had to plot the interest level of art in Trinidad on a graph, right? It's as far as the timeline of the 20th century going into the 21st century, there really are certain peaks and valleys. Almost like an undulating line graph, where art becomes popular, becomes interesting, becomes well supported, and other times where it kind of tapers off and stays kind of quiet for a while, and it picks up again, and so on and so on and so on. And that is something you also have to consider very, very strongly in terms of as you're in your first year of art. And I hope that you'll have every intention of being practitioners in the field of art, right? the Banker's Guide to Art will actually give you a very good idea of what it's like to get into the art market from the standpoint of the collectors, as well as the standpoint from some of the artists as well too. But it's a little bit more focused on the collectors. It's a little bit more focused on if you want to be a collector, if you want to be a big high roller, big spender in the art world. What works you should buy, right? What makes you marketable? And I did say that you kind of have to you have to make some hard decisions. Do I sell my soul? Some artists will want to almost exclusively make work to sell and make lots of money. Others will want to make work that will obviously try to create a certain degree of awareness to things that they feel doesn't have enough awareness, right? And you can't find yourself, purely in one camp or purely in the other corner. You have to be in a kind of a combination between the two. As you kind of see in the case of Casablanca, he was in a kind of a dilemma, in the sense that he had his patronage, but he was also trained in the anti-authoritarian school of painting, and you wonder ultimately where his loyalty obviously lay more towards the passionate side. But you have to study as you have him as a living and a dead example. You also have him that if he created work to support a certain patronage, when that patronage dies off, when that patronage goes down, declines for whatever reason, right? You're sort of out of luck, and you broke, and and people lose interest in you and they go to something else, and these are the type of things you have to think about. Now, there's some other things that may not be mandatory viewing, but other things that gives you. Just give me 1 second. Right, just going for a bit of water. Right. There's other things to think about that were happening at that time of the early 20th century. One of them being World War One. World War One was a big deal, obviously, in the entire world. There wasn't much more a big deal in the Caribbean again, except for people in the Caribbean who decided to go and fight for England. And I think the Parliament channel actually has the link on YouTube that talks about the West Indies at war, and it deals with the Caribbean participation of Caribbean nationals in the First World War. And what you get to learn very quickly through that is that there were a lot of people post-emancipation, in particular, who were frustrated because of the unemployment situation. That. So I mean, because it put people whether you had emancipation or slavery, both of them put black people in a terrible predicament, because they either work with slavery, where you work for free, or you now have, thanks to emancipation, you're now unemployed, right? And they used to have what's called an apprenticeship program, in the sense that apart from working, you had to pay for training, right? And you had to pay for training, most likely for a job that you already used to do, right? So you see the hypocrisy, you see the oppression taking place once again, and the wages were very, very, very menial. And for that reason, this is why a lot of particularly black men in the Caribbean wanted to go and join the army in England and fight, because they wanted something to give them more of a sense of purpose. Even though they had to go to war and die, they wanted to give this whole sense of patriotism and the fighting for the crown and the dignity of that was, at least that was more of an incentive, more of a satisfied a really intrinsic need on their part, rather than be loafing around doing nothing all day, being frustrated. And there's something I think about. These are the types of difficulties that we faced even in the early 20th century, right? So, as we're kind of winding up on the first hour of our session, right? I'm sort of just trying to leave you all with one thing to sum up: that what you're seeing ultimately is that the conclusion I'm trying to really summarize with is that in the case of Casablanca, the patronage played more of a deciding factor in his artwork, Okay, that to me is clear. If you think otherwise, please let me know. But like I said before, the patronage played more of a key role in determining both the subject matter and the paint and his style of painting, right? Like I said before, even though it resembled the realists and the Barbizon who obviously he trained under, when it becomes placed when that same iconography, right, become placed in a Trinidadian context, they're not so offensive, they're not so provocative, right? And they will be very palatable to the plantation class and the governors that supported his work. Okay, so that is something you really have to think about. That you might have the same image or the same type of image, right? Same type of artistic style, everything, but in Europe it means one thing. Down here is not so bad, right? In Europe, it's controversial. It's breaking rules. It's getting people upset. But down here, nothing, right? It's a pitch. It's a beautiful portrait of a beautiful lady, or a man for that matter. A soldier or something like that. Or as you see in the case of that image that really took a very cute image of a child. Obviously a child of somebody affluent because very few people could afford to have an artist to commission an artist to paint a portrait of them. That's another thing I want to think about. There's a book by Jackie Hinkson called Drawing for Days. I don't know if you're familiar with that book, but it's really showing there's an image in the early part in the introduction of the book that I think is of his father, but it's not of his father really. It is a silhouette, right, of the profile, the side view of his face, and this is what people did in the early days if they couldn't even afford photography, because I think photography really started to come here in roughly about the 1920s, 1930s, right? And I think Hinkson actually talks about there's an advertisement for a photography place in that early time, around the time that was just around the time of his parents. But even then, you couldn't afford a portrait, and you couldn't even afford a photograph. So what they used to do was do a black silhouette of your profile, right? And that was how poor people got to be represented visually in ways that they could afford. Okay, and if I can find an image of that'll be really cool. But it is in the book Drawing for Days by Jackie Hinkson, and it sort of shows you the means which he came from. Remember Jackie Hinkson, people like Jackie Hinkson, Peter Minshall, and so on, who became popular around the time of Trinidad's independence. They were from a generation of people who, unlike the Society of Independence, who were affluent people, these people are now people who were more middle to lower middle class, but had access to secondary education, had access to training by the Art Society, right? Which, like I said, the Art Society will be a future incarnation of the Society of Independence, right? And because of that democratization of art that takes place around the later, I say about the mid 20th century, around 1950s, many people who are still alive today benefited from that expansion, right? And for that reason, you had a certain widening, a certain openness of people who are now becoming involved in Trinidad's art that he didn't have before. And that, in a sense, created, more of a different variety of artwork, right? Then you have people. So if I were to try to trace the timeline, you have the Society of Independence around 1930s, and that more or less becomes the Art Society around 1950s, right? And then from that, you have, what's called a generation of 1962. And generation 1962 very specifically was Peter Minshall, Pat Bishop, right? And Jackie Hinkson. And somebody else too by the name of Audley Sewing, who passed away a couple of years ago, right? You will also notice, if I can find a newspaper article, again, because of this COVID-19 thing, everything is kind of at a standstill. In 1962, Peter Minshall actually got the award for most promising artist, right? The Art Society used to have very big, um, I say very big, very prestigious series of awards back then. And one of their sponsors was a bank that's no longer in Trinidad called Chase Manhattan Bank. And you may laugh at the prize money. The prize money was $100. But keep in mind that teacher's salary back in 1962 was about $100 or close to $100. That pretty much was a was the salary of a civil servant for 1 month. And the prestige of the Art Society back then was also something quite significant. It is not quite what it was now. Around the time of independence, you may have heard recently of a woman called Sybil Atek. Her nephew was down here recently giving a lecture. But Sybil Atek was a president of the Art Society during the time of independence, up to when she died in the mid 1970s, and she was really responsible for driving the interest in the Art Society. Now that being said, you have somebody like Leroy Clark coming on in the early 1970s. And Clark is quite interesting because Clark was not really a member. Well, he was a similar age. He wasn't a member of the generation of '62, in a sense that he never went to a prestige school, right? And for that reason, he never had any formal training either, right? Secondly, and for that reason, he wasn't really considered to be part of the Art Society. He had an exhibition, and sorry. He saw Double in Art, and he had an exhibition, and Derek Walcott was quite critical, quite defamatory, quite painted Clark in quite a derogatory light for that review. And the title of the review was in 1966. It was called "Too Early, Mr. Clark," right? And I will try to pull up that review if I have a copy of it. But he said a lot of bad things about Leroy Clark back then. But Clark very quickly emigrates to. Yes, and it's actually that was the case. A lot of people read that review now and thought that Walcott was quite harsh. I'll give you some quotes. I mean, off the top of my head, he was saying things like the only good thing about the work is its price, because it's priced like a clearance sale, but he should have had a clearance without the sale, things like that. He mentioned a couple of things, but it was quite a harsh review, and the thing is that despite that review, Clark was part of Derek Walcott's theater group, and as I'm just simply relating to you conversations that transpired between Leroy Clark and myself. That Clark was saying that Walcott told him as an aside that he had to do that because he felt kind of compelled to do that, and Leroy Clark he said he could have cuffed him down. But despite that review, yes, Walcott is black, but keep in mind, Anissa, Walcott was a St. and Walcott was even at that time very much involved in what was still considered to be a very highbrow thing. Reviewing art. Remember I said before that art has this connotation from the 1930s, from the Society of Independence, even from before that, but from the time of Castleton, you could say, right? It has this connotation of it being a leisurely bourgeois thing, right? And despite the democratization, it's still considered to be that if you go to an art gallery, it's a little bit, more of a high class thing than going to say a Calypso tent, or going to some a best village competition or something like that, right? It still has this connotation of it being kind of stuck up, kind of snooty kind of thing, which it is in some ways, but thankfully, thanks to the efforts of the Art Society itself, and as I mentioned before, in the case of Jackie Hingston and stuff, people who were benefited from that expansion, that democratization, right? And eventually you have art now being, by the time Trinidad becomes independent, art eventually becomes a part of the school curriculum at virtually all the government secondary schools, right? Not just the precious schools alone. But you also have to keep in mind that in the case of tertiary education, it's not until about the early 1990s that tertiary education through the UEDCFA actually becomes an acceptable norm in the art education process. If you had to get a degree in art, you had to go abroad, and the sheer fact that you went abroad means that you had more means to study abroad than somebody who had to study here, right? So that has um, an additional connotation to it, right? Now he's saying that must have incensed Clark. So yeah, let me tell you something. Derek Walker has passed away, but you talk to Leroy Clark now about it, he's still vexed, right? And any chance he gets to bash Derek Walcott, he will still take the opportunity. There was a review that Leroy Clark had written on Derek Walcott's Steel. That was done about 2005, right? And Leroy Clark was quite, again, non-complimentary about Derek Walcott's work and the flaws in that particular thing. But that being said, you also have to take into account the internal dynamics. When I talked to Pat Bishop about that review, Pat Bishop was quite emphatic to say that because of Leroy Clark's lack of social standing. Remember, Leroy Clark came from Gonzales, which is considered to be behind the bridge, is considered to be like a ghetto kind of thing, right? And he's trying to now work his way into the art thing. Well, he's sort of like an unwelcome visitor, right? And when he's having an art exhibition from somebody who is not a prestige school graduate and not somebody who comes from a prestigious family type of thing, is going to be looked at automatically different than somebody who does come from that kind of lineage. And that being said, Clark literally had to go abroad to gain recognition abroad. And even when he came back, right, to that around the mid-1970s, the Art Society, and this is at least according to Pat Bishop and Leroy Clark now, the Art Society wasn't too receptive of his work in the beginning. They were saying that it was always too much like he was copying Raphael Lamb, and it was too this and it was too that. And it's only through his persistence and his audacity, really, his quite frankly, his and also his abilities, his capacity to write quite consistently in the newspapers, right? That made him a public figure, gave him a public presence enough. And the other thing is the spectacular nature of the work. The Leroy Clark's work, because it was so big and it was so bold, it is what made the work noticeable, but secondly, it made it hard to reproduce. And I think that's another thing too. If anybody could have said, well, I can paint, I can draw and paint like Leroy Clark, right? They would have done it. But because Leroy Clark put out work at such an alarming rate, that nobody could really copy his work or imitate his style, and that people started to see the work becoming distinct from everything else. That is what eventually pushed people to gradually embrace his work, right? And I think as well too that he managed to, through his persistence, obviously gain the admiration of public figures as well as the government. So by 1998, when Leroy Clark turned 60, he is given the title of Master Artist. And the only other Trinidadian artist to get that title was Ralph Bainey, sculptor Ralph Bainey, who by that time had emigrated to the United States. But who, if you ever see his sculpture, is quite dramatic as well. I mean, it's quite abstract, but very intricate and very elaborate and quite spectacular sculpture, right? Of this kind of globular morphing kind of forms made out of wood, right? And Chris Cozier did something called a lecture in 2006, 2007, around that time, called The Art of the Monumental, where he only considers the most monumental works of Trinidadian art to be Leroy Clark's Rivers of the Dust and Peter Minshall's Man Crab from River, which I will talk about hopefully in the next session, right? But keep in mind as well too, like I said before, interest level in arts kind of goes in peaks and valleys. So what you have happening pretty much in the Society of Independence going on. Let me see if I can try and draw a diagram of it because I don't know how effectively all time you perceive the thing. So what I'm saying from about 1930 to 1950. Interest, and I just have a graph, say just arbitrarily, it starts off at a certain rate. And by the time it goes to independence, it really goes up, right, to 1962. Until the 1970s, it's sort of as I climb, keeps on climbing. And by the time we reach the 1980s, the interest level drops quite dramatically. So I'm just trying to do a quick makeshift graph here. So I'm saying by about 1930, right, you have a Society of Independence coming up, and that slowly starts to more or less stay stagnant for a little while, 1940s and stuff like that. And then by the 1950s, when the art society starts to reach out to the wider communities, you start to see interest levels start to rise and go up and up and up and up. And then around 1962, it really reaches like a crescendo. And then, and he's saying who gave him the title. It's actually the Ministry of Culture gave him that title. There was a curator of the National Museum at the time called Vel Lewis, who's still around. I think he's but I think it was specifically Vel Lewis, the curator of the National Museum. By the name of a German by the name of Vel Lewis, was quite instrumental in that bestowing of that title on Leroy Clark. The current curator of the National Museum right now is Nima Moakil. So she basically took over from Vel Lewis, but Vel Lewis, I think, is a PS in one of the ministries. I can't remember which. I know it's the Ministry of National Security, or one of the ministries. He was a ministry. He went from curator of the National Gallery to PS in the Ministry of Culture, and then moved on to another ministry. And it was Ministry of Planning or something like that. But this happened over the past 5 years, right? But if you want to know who directly was really responsible for bestowing the title of Master Artist on Leroy Clark, it was Vel Lewis of the Ministry of Culture when he was Ministry of Culture back in 1998, right? But I'm trying to show the interest level in art because it goes up, and more or less with Leroy Clark and stuff, it really keeps on going in 1970s, and by the time about the early 1980s, by around 1983, it just all of a sudden nosedives, right? And until oh boy, trying to find some more people here. Until they have the selection of the Victoria Institute that you now know as National Gallery. Remember the only real exhibition place you had for works of art was the Art Society building that you have there. That little building that you have there in Federation Park. That was the exhibition space. There may have been other impromptu temporary spaces. For example, I'll tell you, there was an exhibition at Balizé House in 1960s. Right? There was exhibitions may have been also taking place in town halls, in the lobbies of certain banks. But the only real dedicated exhibition space for Trinidad's art was the Art Society. And after Sybil Attek passed away around 1975, the momentum of the Art Society kind of begins to die down a little bit until by about 1983, it really started to just go down. Pat Bishop told me back then she described the word moribund to describe the whole art scene, right? But by this time now, too, you have a couple other art galleries also starting to pop up. One of them being Aquarella, which has now become Medulla Art Gallery, and the 101 Art Gallery, which has now become, it's still called the 101 Art Gallery, but it's now on on Picton Street, I think. Right? Yeah. So, any questions at all? Any comments? Any feedback you'll want to chip in right now and say? Anything? So waiting. Oh, here's crickets. Okay. Right. Um, Resource till 7. No, no, no. I can't give you a full half an hour. I can give you about another 10-minute break just to catch yourselves, and now about 10-15 minutes we can take a little recess. Right. I can't really show you any movie. We can't really do it. Or I may put a live a watch party on Facebook. But again, then again, it has to be something like I said that's exclusive to us and us alone. I can put video links on the Classroom app, but there are things that are there that shouldn't really be accessible to any and everybody, because that will sort of undermine the whole purpose of doing this lecture and doing this online format. Now, you don't want somebody who hasn't paid their tuition fees, who hasn't had any affiliation to infiltrate our little enclosed group here, and then start to you never know, could raise some real serious disruption and say things, But I'm willing to be open to any suggestions. I'm even willing to. As Aaron is saying right now, this is G-rated. Yeah, I have to keep it G-rated. I can't say anything provocative, anything out of the ordinary. We're dealing with art, and the videos I am putting up are also very, very tame. Okay, I can recommend certain things if you want to see certain things outside of class, but I really want to stick at least with this time dealing with the transition of art from the 19th to the 20th century, right? And like I said before, Trinidad doesn't really experience that much of a real upheaval in its art until about the 1930s, when you have a form of abstraction starting to take place. And then even then, the subject matter is quite tame. So you can look up the work of people like Hugh Stallmeyer and Amy Leong Pang, and although they are representing in more innovative ways of representation, the subject matter is the same. A market woman, a girl carrying coconuts, a beach scene, very, very tame things, right? The only time that, like I said, Leroy Clark comes along, and all of a sudden you get a title of a painting in like Slave Ship called Pregnant Bitch, which freaks people out. What I will do, Jean David, is I will try and draw it out properly and just scan it and put it up on the classroom, right? So that you will get a timeline and sort of the interest level. And I think I'll try to expand on that timeline a little bit, because what happens is that Trinidad's arts and to a wider extent Caribbean arts experiences, I won't say a renaissance, so to speak, but as far as art criticism is concerned, when a lot of intellects all of a sudden become interested in Caribbean arts around the late 1990s, right? That is when you start to see this whole thing about conceptual art taking place. So I have to put up the video on Banker's Guide and another video about conceptual art. The conceptual art one is quite good because it talks about the name of the video is called "Who is Afraid of Who is Afraid of Conceptual Art" by a scholar called Dr. James Fox of the BBC. And there you might get some more provocative stuff, because you literally have a guy called Piero Manzoni who took a small tin and canned his excrement, right? He canned his excrement. And what he did was to state that the price of that artwork would correspond to the weight of that can of human feces in gold, right? Now, that's the 1960s. Now, I think that the Tate bought an example because he did a series of them and numbered them, right? I think Tate bought one for about £27,000. And for that reason, now the price of his feces is actually worth more than the price than the price that it would fetch, that the weight of the object would fetch in gold, right? And you sort of have to look at conceptual art, in a general sense, as something, you know, kind of funny, kind of, undermining, kind of silly, but at the same time, it has very serious connotations. And you also have to, again, look at conceptual art, look at what is happening on the global art scene with conceptual art, and looking at our conceptual art in Trinidad. Because while just like them, we have conceptual art, our concepts are different. And this is something I have to keep on, again, the issue of context, issue of place, right? It's important because in a Trinidadian context, certain concepts like the plantation, like racism, like oppression, like what we call, the difference between the classes of people, the infighting between different races. These are some things that are very serious. They determine our daily lives, determine our politics, and they determine our art as well. The work by Marlon Griffiths I had shown you last time we all gathered together before COVID-19 ruined this for us, was the fact that you have this image of the schoolgirls with the powder, right? And they have certain tribal patterns, and they have Louis Vuitton logos and stuff like that. And the whole thing about if it's a girl, if it's a school child with all this powder on there, that's a connotation of a real good girl, a real bad girl could fight. And like I said, you have to have the ponytail. The hair has to be in a bun above the head, not behind, but above the head, right? That's a real girl you don't want to mess with kind of thing. If I have a knife, she might have weapons on her, and she always in the principal's office and that kind of thing. And taking that issue of the powder, and then making art out of that. It is making a statement, making a very serious statement. That's the next thing that you have to keep in mind. Minstrel's River, for example, was about, it was a folk tale that he wrote for the carnival performance, right? And again, it is showing issues of mechanization, of colonialism, and how we have, how these things have corrupted our society and made our society corrupt, and how they remain with us, and how we have to learn to, if we don't deal with them, these things will get out of hand and kill us all, right? And you also have the issue of Leroy Clark, and I'm going to get very much into the narrative of Leroy Clark, because what Leroy Clark did was to take the folklore character of the Dwen, right? He said that he created his art as a form of self-indictment, a form of blaming himself, saying that the image or the figure that he attaches to himself to explain why the black person is always suffering is this whole issue of the Dwen, right? And if you don't know, the Dwen is a child, is a little devil, a little child, right? That has a big short hat, right? And it has no face, so its face is always covered, and its feet are turned backwards, so that and it always, if you ever find a toddler alone, the story is that it will take your child and lead him or into the forest and get lost forever. And that whole that whole character, just the imagery of it, has a lot of metaphor, because it's feet are turned backwards, it is always in a state of backward movement, right? It has no face, so it has no identity, right? And then it leads people astray if you follow him, right? So those three characteristics that he was sort of saying that by him conforming to traditional colonial education structures that have remained with us. That is what he was putting himself, that is what he was becoming. And he was saying that all his countrymen, right, will be becoming that too. And he said that that he had to, begin his self-indictment by characterizing himself, by realizing that he's a Duen, and then making the ascent up El Takush. Now, El Takush is the second highest mountain in Trinidad. And El Takush is directly in the shadow of the highest mountain, which is Cerro de Aripo, right? And he's using El Takush as like a representation of the height of spirituality, right? Whether or not you agree with it, that is what he has been preaching since about the time in the early 70s till now, right? He's making a spiritual ascension to that thing, and anybody who wishes to join him can join him on his work, and he's doing that through his art, okay? Whether or not you agree with that is ultimately up to you, but the other issue concerning Trinidad's art is that it has a story, it has a narrative behind it. Now, what you also get coming out of Clark, and remember, when you see somebody presenting you with a certain type of unique style and a certain type of iconography combined with a certain type of narrative, right? You also have to see, well, you also have to think to yourself, well, what inspired that, and what is a key inspiration for these philosophies, so to speak, is the work of Alfredo Cordayo. Now, again, Alfredo Cordayo was an illustrator in the 1950s, right? Who created very, very detailed, images of local folklore. Remember, local folklore in Trinidad was an oral tradition, like it is throughout most of the islands, right? And for that reason, when somebody would mention, a Sukuya or a Lagahu or a Duen or whatever, people have to obviously use your imagination to think of what it is. And thanks to Cordayo sort of empowered the population through art. He would sort of give them a direct representation of something, so that, once you mention those characters from now on, bam, you can now see that you have a Cordayo image to refer to. What he also did was to depict non-Christian rituals in his art. So he would do like, a representation of a limbo or a Shango function, or a Hindu function as well, right? And for that reason, he was also trying to show that, Trinidad is more than just simply what the colonials defined us as. They had through his art, there are other representations of what makes us Trinidadian, right? You have Hinduism, you have Shango, you have Obia, you have everything else, and that is all part of the whole mix that makes us Trinidadian. And but because he was an illustrator and mostly did his work in pen and ink, people didn't consider him, again, because he was from a relatively poor local poor class, didn't go to the prestige schools and stuff like that, wasn't a member of the art society, at least not in the beginning, right? He wasn't so well embraced by the art, by aficionados of art, and his work wasn't considered to be art. It was published in newspapers, yes, but it was considered to be more illustration than art. And again, the whole thing about class is coming up again. Who you are and where you came from, and who your parents are, and what your skin color is, and what school you go to. All these things, they just doesn't matter now. They were an even bigger deal back then, right? So this is something that you have to really, really think about. These are some things, I guess you could say is the legacy that we have inherited from the plantation, and it is something that that whether we like it or not, it is part of us, right? So if I have to try to trace the lineage now from people like Stormare and Amy Leong Pang in the 1930s, then you move on to people like Jackie Hingston and Peter Minshall in the 1960s. And then you move on to people like dominance of Leroy Clark in the 1970s, right? And that kind of Leroy Clark's dominance combined with Jackie Hingston and those other people still continues throughout most of the 1980s. And then in around 1990, you're going to see a rise of what is called avant-garde artists or conceptual artists in Trinidad. And I mentioned some specific names. People like Christopher Cozier, Steve Udit, Wendy Nanan, right? John Stallmeyer, key figures. Yeah, a few more should come to mind later, but Wendy Nanan, Christopher Cozier, Hugh Stallmeyer, and Steve Udit. These are some key figures in the conceptual art of the 1990s, right? And these people are creating artwork that is meant to, in some ways, be closer affiliated. Okay, I need to make a very good point. It will appear that there are a handful of people in this country who determine how popular artists can get. Then why stay here? That's a very good question. I mean, you see that most artists, in order to quote unquote make it, have to have their work exhibited outside, right? You could either continue doing art. Thankfully, like I said, for the internet, you can put your art out there, but the art market, as you will see in that video, The Banker's Guide to Art, it is very, very. It shows that, for lack of a better word, the whole art is a very nasty business because it's an unregulated business. There's no authority, there's no organization, there's no central board to determine what is good and what is bad art, right? They put the artist out there, and if the art and basically if the artist is able to grab the attention of the people of the people who buy the art and collect the art and write about the art, then that artist basically makes it. There are some cases, and you keep on hearing about the foreign artists who have made it. What you don't hear about, and it's another really bad thing, is the foreign artists who didn't make it, or even some of the foreign artists who looked like they were going to make it. One particular artist that was talked about quite a bit in the mid 2000s, around 2012, 2013, was an Indian artist called Subodh Gupta, Subdoh. It's Dodh. I think I'll try to find a proper spelling. But his name was Subodh Gupta, and what he did was he made several sculptures. I know in India there are these Okay, Chloe is asking, what can we do to change that about Trinidad? I'll tell you precisely what you could do. And I'm very guilty of. I was trying to do it, but I can't do it alone. Is there has to be a consistent dialogue about that. That's the only way. It has to be consistent. It has to be accessible. I was going to actually talk to you about a surprise I had planned for you, but you see, when I was okay, give an example. When I was writing the TNC review from about 2008 to about 2013, right? The questions, and I just thought I was writing a monthly article, right? Just reviewing shows. I didn't think much of it. Unbeknownst to me, it became a big deal because people in the galleries noticed, and they started to appreciate the consistency of the writing. Right, whether it was good, whether it was bad, and I think as well too, the writing called for more visual analysis. What you have, well, exactly. What is what I'm trying to say with Ariana, and I'm saying that what you are saying, as far as the subject matter is concerned, right? It comes back all the way. It goes. The problem of that subject matter goes all the way back to Casabon. Right, because exactly what Casabon was painting, the nice tropical forest and the nice beaches and the nice people, right? All of that is still prevalent now. This is what the art market in Trinidad wants most of all, right? The only thing that's different, let me just put a little caveat on. The only thing that's different is that if the work gets recognized, outside. Chris Cozier, for example, because of his kind of interesting drawings and stuff like that, because he's gotten the title for the Prince Claus Award, he's gotten certain commissions from certain institutes abroad. All of a sudden, you're hot, right? But I dare to say that not even that, as far as to maintain long-term interest, right, is sufficient, right? You constantly hear artists do big things outside, but as far as the local art scene here, people that barely raises a few eyebrows, right? I think the only thing is that if the work were to all of a sudden fetch, a massive amount of money, something like 100 million US or something like that, then people will start to start to pay attention. But this thing about the price of art gaining attention, it is something that is a global problem right now. It has been recognized as a global problem in the art world, right? You have paintings that cost more than an airplane, right? Sometimes, most of the time, as you'll see in the Banker's Guide, this guy was trying to smuggle out a Picasso painting, and the painting was worth more money than the yacht he was using to smuggle it out, right? Um, but I did say that if you are able to make an impact in the art market in that aspect, the money aspect of it, how much the work sold for, it will at least raise eyebrows, not just in terms of attention, of getting attention because of the large sum of money, but it would really raise the eyebrows in terms of this is what the art market can do, right? If you have one work that fetches 100 million, in the vicinity of 100 million US dollars, I think what that would do for the foreign exchange situation in our country, right? If you have, if you see yourself about 200 artworks and say one or two of them literally, so either 0.1% or 0.05% of them make it, then that has been a successful sale, right? And these are the things that have to be done. But before that happens, one other reading I want to share with you all is a reading by C.L.R. James called "The Artist in the Caribbean." And what the Artist in the Caribbean is basically saying that if you want to go international, you have to be able to organize yourself nationally first. You basically have to make your art about a national subject and get in touch with your immediate environment and address your immediate environment before you begin to be recognized internationally, before your work, so that once you gain credibility locally, you first have to gain credibility locally in order to gain acceptance and respect abroad. Now, this has happened before, but it has happened in a different form of expression. And the form of expression that C.L.R. James writes about is the calypso. Because he shows that the calypso manages to succeed on several levels. One, it is a sophisticated form of expression. It is to its handling of rhythm and vocabulary and stuff like that. It is able to address topics in a very sophisticated, eloquent manner. But at the same time, it is still accessible to all levels of society, right? So you have something that is deep and profound, right? But at the same time, being able to connect with the entire population, right? And only then will you now have the consequence of that is that when now foreigners start to look at calypso, they will, instead of you having to explain it to them, they will now study the Trinidadian context and develop their own appreciation, right? For why the calypso is doing something so successfully. Something like Sparrow's Congo Man, for example. Is obviously a statement about black empowerment, right? And black virility and stuff like that. But it's done in a very humorous and eloquent way, right? This is what is being argued that our art has to do. You have to create art that is not too aloof out there that nobody can understand, right? But the fundamental thing is that you have to create art that can connect with everybody in Trinidad, and then foreigners will begin to appreciate it. What you now have happening is the opposite. You have art that is being created by Trinidadians, but it's being created by Trinidadians, for a foreign audience, because the foreign audience is obviously more receptive to the art than we are, right? And then you also get the dilemma that the art is not so accessible unless you go to a gallery, unless you happen to have the time to go to these galleries and sort of be like a gallery roadie and check out every single gallery and every single show, you won't see all the art. And that's another problem we have, that a lot of good art is being created all the time in Trinidad, but it's not visible, it's not accessible. So what I was hoping to do, and if you're are feeling seriously motivated by it, we need to have like a publication, like a newsletter. We can sell it online, and hopefully, if we get enough money later on, we can do it as in hard copy and circulate it to the papers, to the mass media, right? It'll have to be, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to engage. I think it should engage not just UWI people but everybody, because you're I mean, let's face it, you're only studying here for a limited time. You're studying here for 2 years or 3 years, and then you'll graduate, and then hopefully go on to bigger and better things. But what is hoped is that you'll continue to do art and continue to have an environment, to sort of inculcate an environment that will be supportive of your art. That's the next thing too, right? Quite sadly, that has been the biggest problem. The biggest problem is not so much even the support, because the galleries do their best, but the issue is consistency more than anything else. And like I said, ever since I started this thesis thing, I really had to stop writing about art, because I don't have the time, and I don't get rewarded for it. So I didn't really have an incentive to keep on writing, about art. But it is something that needs to be carried on, but carried on consistently. And the next thing too is the issue of context, right? Because what you saw happening is that even in the 1960s, when you had some very serious art criticism going on by Derek Walcott, it was not bad considering he did with Leroy Clark. But with Derek Walcott, it was the articles, the reviews were placed in a section of the paper called The Talk of Trinidad, which, if you do the history a little bit, there was a column in the Trinidad Guardian in the 1960s. Actually, Minshall's mother, Jean Minshall, ran that column. And it would have certain socialite things, like certain cocktail parties. It's the same way like when you have an art exhibition now, or you have a function, a visit, a diplomatic function. You will see little snapshots of people drinking wine and socializing, right? And then next to that would be the art review. So the whole issue of context, and I think that was a very, it still remains a very serious problem, that people think art is a leisurely thing. It's a nice thing. It's a sort of, yeah, Timothy. The issue of Google Arts would be a good thing, but the problem with Google Arts is that it requires some serious technology behind it. So that's it. Google Arts is really have that. I'm not saying people have access to it, but the image, apart from having the panoramic camera that can take virtual images of a gallery space, to photograph an image properly and put it up in high resolution enough that you can see the texture of the paint, is something that is very difficult. It's not so easy to do, because to find a server that would facilitate that, right? The publication would be good, but I think that obviously in printing, the business of printing, because I'm involved in printing for a long time before I started getting involved with art, printing requires money, and the only way you get money in printing is from advertising. So if any of you all have access to an ad agency, if you all have access to an ad agency to deal with people who could actually access advertising, right? That would be something. But in the meantime, as you saw with the apps like Issue and so on, you can have like a kind of virtual book where you can kind of flip pages through a publication. But there needs to be something like, say, like every month or every 2 months, that reviews people's work, talks about issues in art, talks about you know student work, as well as as the arts of those who practice. And it all needs to be, what you have happening on Facebook right now is you have individuals putting up stuff, but it needs to be really conglomerated into one publication, so that everybody, so that people who are not so familiar with everything going on can see everything that's going on in one document. That's what I'm proposing. But like I said, we can talk about it a little bit more hopefully after this virus thing settles down. And I was actually thinking of it can go either way. I think it can go either among the UE students as a UE publication, or it can go as a separate publication that could include your as UE students, but also pull in people, practitioners as well, people in the art society and stuff like that. If you go to the Heritage Library again, like I said, there was a time when the art society had a newsletter, right? I could show you examples of that. But again, I think that is too restricted. What really gained a lot of traction because the writings that I had done were in the Express, which had a wide circulation. Um, that is what made it very accessible and very popular. And the Northerly, what's the Northerly? Okay, but I still think that the Guardian has a special publications unit, and so is the Express. But like, again, those things cost money, and we may not be able to raise the funding to do that, right? The real issue is to do it virtually and see how the interest level goes, get a gauge the interest level, and then from that we could either hopefully gain enough traction to at least put it in a. Yeah, Adele. I've actually been talking to Adele about that, right? But and I think that I have a name for it and everything. I don't want to quite drop it on you yet. I have an interesting name for it. Nothing, nothing provocative, right? But it is something hopefully if I can talk to her and collaborate with her on that, it could actually get off the ground. I have a terrible tendency to try to come up with wonderful ideas and then nothing gets off the ground because of either lack of interest or lack of support. Um, so yeah, I think that how many of you all here are familiar with layout software like InDesign and so on? I know Adele deals with the graphic design, doesn't she? Adele Todd has been everybody's saying that Adele Todd has been also pushing forward this idea of a newsletter. But like I said before, there are two things that have to be determined before it gets off the ground. Is it a publication just involving you as UWI students or individual arts departments, or does it? I am suggesting that it also be inclusive of the wider art scene as well too, so that galleries can contribute and yeah, exactly how would it appear, Chloe, like a newspaper edition, like the women's section, right, in the Guardian, right? But what I'm also contemplating that it will actually be a different size, so that the reason why, say you have an insert in the newspaper, so you have a big newspaper and you have an insert in it, and what that will do is it will kill two birds with one stone. One, it will be more noticeable because it will be different from the rest of the newspaper. And then secondly, because it's smaller than the rest of the papers than the pages in the newspaper, it would obviously mean the advertising rates will be cheaper. So say a full page advertisement in the newspapers cost X amount, cost like $8,000, right? In this particular publication, because it's small, it costs like $4,000, right? That is the whole strategy behind doing a different size publication, but it will still be, because the insert in the newspaper, it will still enjoy the distribution um outside that you're really looking for, because what advertisers care about is numbers. They care about, well, how many people is this thing going to reach, right? So let me just start. I don't want to get we can talk online about the idea, right? Yes, as Chloe said, the wider art scene in Trinidad, because you really have to welcome everybody, every and anybody who is taking this art scene seriously. Obviously, we have to have like an editorial board who will determine what is appropriate and what is inappropriate. You obviously can't put anything libelous or slanderous in it. Um, but apart from just adhering to basic journalistic responsibility. Anything is fair game, right? People could talk about their artwork. People could do art reviews. People could do even reviews of work of art in progress, right? May have certain groups of you all who are doing artwork, and you may want to do like a journal entry up to a certain point. Even that will be fair, good content, right? Safia say no slander. No, you can't. You can't. Really, for legal reasons, you can't, right? Um, but the content, I don't think there's any shortage of content. You have people in second and third year who are doing artwork, but the work may be exhibited in a certain, even if it's exhibited, say, in the lobby of the Albert Jordan Library, which is good, which improves our exposure. But at the same time, you have people outside who are seeing the work, and hopefully, you will have the work being exhibited in galleries, now being shown in galleries. That would, gain some traction. So before you graduate, you will have some gallery experience, you know, to be able to put in your portfolio and say that, that I, as an artist, I have done so and so, over the years, right? It is something quite critical and quite crucial. And like I said, I will do like a little I was hoping to do a blog about it, but I really think that if it is imported, I was hoping that some of y'all would know things like InDesign and Quark Express and stuff like that. Software that's actually for layout of documents, not just for doing single images, right? Because what happens in InDesign is that you can have a whole bunch of text going from one page to the next, and have different images and stuff like that there, right? Um, but let me just catch my breath for a little bit. Um, as you'll talk about that, um, I want to sort of go into a little bit into the what I have planned for the next session, right? Comment is saying it's ebooks. There is software like Issue that will take your document and turn it into an ebook basically, right? I also have PDFs, so like you can make the whole thing one big PDF that everybody could read. Um, but nothing. What I have learned about the publishing industry, even in these times, that you have to, if you're going to do a publication, no particular format will succeed on its own. What you have to do is that you have to do like you have to do an app, you have to do a ebook format, and you have to do the hard copy as well too. Nothing beats hard copy, even in this digital day and age, right? That's just how the issue is. But because the TNT review is online right now, but because it used to be distributed in hard copy, that's the only time people noticed it, and the only time that advertisers would pay attention to it. If it's and you can sort of gauge that. I'll tell you how you can gauge it. You can look at a typical transmission by CNC3 or TTT or something like that. See the press conference Prime Minister, the government had today, and that had roughly about 2,000 views on it at a particular time. Most time with CNC3, it's about 400, 500 views, and it is basically the 10% rule, that only roughly 10% of your population, of your target audience, is actually actively accessing online content at one particular time, right? The other 90%, we couldn't care less. The other 90% might access it later, or they might not bother. They might just watch it on the old-fashioned TV, right? So these are some of the realities. People think that because you're online and they have the internet at their fingertips, that everything is also wonderful and so accessible. And the reality is, from the other standpoint, if you are somebody producing something, trying to get noticed, it is literally like you in the middle of the ocean, and nobody can see you, right? Unless you do something big and bold to get noticed, right? Any comments? Any other feedback that you wish to provide? Okay. All right. So I'll probably just go on for a little half an hour just to try to say about what we plan to do for the next session, right? And like I said before, while we have to be focused on our art and architecture, from our personal, our limited Trinidad experience, I'll mention some other books that we should really take note of. One of them is Caribbean Architecture by Andrew Gravette, Gravette, and that talks very specifically about different elements in different buildings that are very distinct and unique, and even goes into detail discussing certain buildings in certain islands of the Caribbean. Right? Caribbean architecture never really, there was no, Caribbean architecture sort of evolved. It didn't really come about. There was no particular school of thought to say, I all of a sudden I want to do Caribbean architecture, right? The gingerbread houses and stuff like that we know to be distinctly Caribbean um, came about from Victorian architecture, basically. And obviously, there had to be some um, construction, some engineering considerations for the building to be, for the structure to be reasonably livable in a tropical environment, right? One of those factors was that the building had to be well ventilated, right? And that this was before electricity was even widely accessible for us for air conditioning. So you would find that most of the older buildings that you may still see remnants of, right, particularly wooden ones, they were built about 2 or 3 feet off the ground to actually cool the floor, right? All of them had shutters in them, so that whatever angle you want in the house, that the breeze can pass to the house. They all of them had verandas, and these considerations then became, Caribbeanized to some extent, right? And what you also have to look at is examples of the Caribbean where certain architectural elements that have been brought from abroad are now very much a part of our architecture without us even knowing. And so you have the kind of Victorian architecture that becomes the stereotypical gingerbread house, right? You also have stone buildings out of concrete that have certain the kind of thing where you have a veranda or porch over hanging over the entrance of a building below in a two-story building. That's also something that is unique that is at least unique, a little bit more popular in the Caribbean architecture. And sadly, what you also see happening is that a lot of these examples have been literally broken down in recent times too. Greyfriars Church was a classic example. There's some Casablanca paintings of Greyfriars Church. Greyfriars Church has a long history, right? But the only example you really have of neo-Gothic architecture right now is Trinity Cathedral in Woodford Square, downtown Port of Spain. Like I said before, the real deviation of the neo-Gothic architecture is really the simplification of the Gothic style. In a typical Gothic architecture, you would have two towers, and then you have two big towers, and then the entrance to the church in the middle. What you have in Trinity is kind of like two small towers, and the entrance actually bigger, right? But it is overall a simplification of the Gothic architecture. That is prevalent, but it also goes to show you that our the treatment of our historical heritage, our built historical heritage, because of another word for architecture or another word for old time architecture in the Caribbean is built heritage. You can't see that term being used very often now, right? Well, look at buildings like the Magnificent Seven along the Savannah, right? The upkeep and the maintenance of those buildings is a very good documentary done by Finn Richards. Um, Done interviews with the Citizens for Conservation of Trinidad and Tobago that deals with the history of those buildings, right? Buildings like Millefleur, Whitehall, the Holy See, right? Stormyers Castle, Queen's Royal College. All those buildings were, part of, they were built by either, entities that obviously were wealthy, and particularly Whitehall has some serious structural problems, And Milflo has been, it's in a very, very bad state because it's been one time was owned by the Law Society for a long time and nothing was done. Then it was taken over by the court and still nothing was still done. And then so on and so on. So it remains in this terrible state. And the treatment of our historical buildings is something that again it kind of becomes disturbing because on one side there are remnants of our colonial past, but they also are representative of our inability to take over from our colonial past as well too, right? And that is one of the sad things that we have remaining with us today. Again, the legacy of the plantation, because when our ancestors were being, oppressed as slaves or as indentured workers, no one really told you that, apart from this being my house, this is also your house as well. The sense of ownership, it was always a master house and I have nothing to do with that, right? And eventually, master house are falling down. And even if master's house is not given to you, right, it is not falling down. And the same thing for a long time with our artwork. Um, Casabo, like I said, Gumata Casabo, died in relative obscurity. And very little effort was done to preserve his artwork. Even when his work was on display in the National Museum, there was somebody wrote a comment about it in the thesis that the water from the AC was dripping down on one of the paintings, right? And this is probably part of the problems that we have. You have a lot of things that aren't sustainable over a long period of time. There's this real sense of neglect, and if anything ever comes about that happens to be good, there's no consistency in it, right? I really wish I could share images with you all about CCA 7. Because when CCA 7 came out around the year 2000, which is now 20 years ago, it was a hell of a gallery space. It was a very modern, um, innovative gallery space that would literally be on par with anywhere else in any other big country in the world, right? But because it didn't get the support, because it didn't get the consistency, because I think to some extent as well too, there was this division between CCA 7 artists and the other artists that the gallery didn't survive because obviously other more conservative artists who didn't think that they were part of that CCA 7 thing, right, felt excluded and felt that these kind of newcomers who all of a sudden feel they begin the bad, want to take over everything and sort of put us in a negative light. They haven't learned something, right? And that's precisely what has happened in the sense that you have artists who sort of adhered more to the conservative, and I did say the realist, the tenets of realism, right? That we inherited from since Casaubon's time, right? The artists who have stuck to that, and the artists who have, and even the other artists who have been, who were who preceded that avant-garde time, like Leroy Clark, who were bold and brave in the 1970s, but preceded that whole conceptual art thing, right? They sort of were shunned by the CCA 7 group, and I mentioned before, these were the artists, the CCA 7 artists were the people who gained a lot of recognition in the 1990s. Again, like I mentioned the four names off the top of my head: Christopher Cozier, Wendy Nanan, Steve Udit, and one more. His name eludes me right now. So Chris Cozier, Wendy Nanan, Steve Udit, and I can mention another one who I didn't mention before, Francisco Cabral, right? These artists try to really project themselves as being creating work. Oh, sorry, the name I was forgetting was John Stallmeyer, right? Yeah, well, so I mentioned. Let me type in there so I'll keep it. So it's Chris Cozier, Wendy Nanan, Steve Udit, and John Stallmeyer. Right? Those four artists, particularly John Stallmeyer, and I'll talk about a particular work by John Stallmeyer in a little bit more detail. The name of the work is called Caribbean Basin. I'll see if I can find a picture of it online because it's not so accessible, right? Um, Caribbean Basin, for anybody I know, anybody who was alive in the 1980s prior to the American invasion of Grenada. Caribbean Basin was a metal bowl, like a typical metal bowl that poor people had, or poor people ate out of, and in that metal bowl had three rust spots, and the rust spots were one was in the shape of one was in the shape of Grenada, one was in the shape of Cuba, and one was in the shape of Nicaragua, right? And the term Caribbean Basin came about by the U.S. government as a way of, by the Ronald Reagan administration, as a way of trying to create a means of economically assisting the islands of the Caribbean, right? It was called Caribbean Basin, and they was trying to, so it was particularly trying to help the Caribbean, where it considered to be underprivileged islands of the Caribbean, which includes most of us, right? Through aid, as well as creating economic incentives, right, to trade with the United States, right? And some people saw it as something positive. Other people who kind of believed in the whole communism thrust of Cuba felt that was another form of U.S. colonialism, right? And what Stallmeyer did by creating this basin with these holes in it of a certain country, because Cuba was obviously the first country to defy the United States and and basically succeed in overthrowing a corrupt administration that was supported by the United States. And Fidel Castro took over and has remained communist ever since. And then Nicaragua was also resisting the United States as well too, right? They had these Sandinistas that were essentially pro-communist, and they were fighting rebels that were supported by the U.S. government, right? And then you also had Grenada, which had the Grenada Revolution of 1979, where Maurice Bishop overthrew Sir Ecmac Gary, and that revolution basically established Grenada as being affiliated with Cuba and Russia and stuff like that, and they were trying to make what he thought was a more fair and equitable system of government. And of course, that was defeated through the revolution, through the American invasion, right? And you can get into a lot of videos on the Grenada, the invasion of Grenada. But you would think that why would the U.S. government be interested in invading this tiny little island? And a lot of politics and a lot of interest in Grenada. Grenada was a real hotbed of controversy in the early 1980s. Prior to that, right? And what Stallmeyer was trying to show that with this Caribbean basin, with this physical basin, was that the basin could not hold water, right? So the basin with these holes in the shape of Cuba, Grenada, and Nicaragua was an ineffective basin, right? That's what he's trying to show. And it's just a little white metal enamel bowl with these little dots with the little shapes in it cut out that look like rust spots, right? And that is what was considered to be the first real conceptual example of conceptual art in Trinidad, specifically. And next to that was Minshall's River that took place the same year. And Minshall's River sort of, if you watch the performance, the video record of the performance, it was sort of like a street opera, in the sense that it had all the grandeur and the splendor of a opera, a grand theatrical performance on the street, right? And again, you have certain dynamics taking place. You have the whole notion of people trying to separate art and carnival. People trying to say, well, what Minshall did was art and it's not carnival, right? And then within that, you had people saying things like, he was getting preferential treatment, like when the Man Crab performance, when the Man Crab was being performed on the stage, that because he was using Tassan music and everybody else was using soca, that he is obviously deviating from the norm, right? And then you also had that in the Carnival King finals, that in the 10 contestants, as far as the points were concerned, it got 10th place, it got last place, but it also won. It also earned people's choice because people loved the performance. People thought it was very relevant and very timely and very creative at the time and very spectacular, right? But because of the politics of Carnival, which I have to admit still goes on today, right? That it wasn't well embraced in the Carnival context. And I keep on saying that Trinidad has two carnivals. Trinidad has a bourgeois carnival, right? And Trinidad has a ghetto carnival, right? Not really keeping in mind that the whole impetus behind the modern day carnival of today was a Kambuli carnival that was created by slaves and descendants of slaves, right? So again, like I said, that's a separate thing. I'm not going to obviously if you happen to be jumping up in Hearts or in Tribal and Bliss or whatever it is, I'm not going to chastise you for that. But I'm just saying that these are the types of things that make up everyday Trinidad. And it's one of the reasons why Trinidadans can't seem to get together and unite for any particular thing, right? Because everybody sees themselves as being different from the other person next to them, and not only different, but everybody sees themselves as being entitled to something more than the person next to them, right? So you have examples today, like when you have hand sanitizer going on stage, going for sale in Pennywise, people fighting down each other for that because they feel that they should get before you, right? All this kind of thing, right? It is now in our politics. You always see an opposition and government that will never work together for a common cause, and this is a health crisis. But you have people there who are trying to not only look after their health and well-being, but look after their political gains as well too, right? So all these things are now coming into play and being displayed for everybody to see, right? The other issue I want to take note of in Trinidadian art is when you look at Trinidadian history, particularly traumatic events in Trinidadian history, I'm counting on a few key points, right? If you did history, one was World War One, which I said would be best exemplified by the video, the West Indies at War. That's put up by the Parliament channel. But the trade union riots and so on, right, in the 1930s, with Uriah Butler and so on. Yes, Anissa, you have a point there, but and I'll also go into the fact that some of our artwork, particularly the early artwork by Chris Crozier, was performance-based. But performance art is something, again, that is within the sphere of conceptual art and happens very early on in the 20th century. Now, if I were to just digress a little bit, right? The again, like I said before, nothing was really significantly happening in the Caribbean to really affect the entire population in a very traumatic way. World War One in Europe was a very traumatic thing because it was considered to be the first mechanized war, right? And what the artists, if you want to sort of get a little preamble into the next session, what the artists at that time were saying was that they had to resort to other means of representation because realistic or figurative representation came from rational thought, came from rational and scientific thought. And that rational or scientific thought, the same science that led to, discovery and so on, was also leading to technology that was causing mass murder, right? And so they were saying that, if you keep on this path of technological development, right, of industrialization, right, that you're going to end up with a human catastrophe. And they saw themselves being vindicated by when World War I happened, that this was a result of their constant preaching and their constant mindset, right? But in that whole scene, there's several genres, and some of them support each other, some of them didn't, right? And as well too, in the transition from realism to impressionism to post-impressionism, that has more to do with photography, which again is a technology, okay? But the issue of performance art is something that happens in the early 20th century, and it happens through two movements. It happens through a movement called Dadaism, which is also called the art of the irrational, and it happens through another movement called Futurism, which is about art about the future, right? And Dadaism was very much about creating a form of art that was against art. It was called anti-art. Okay? And what they were saying was that they are creating artwork that is performance art and is not theater. Because what they were saying is that they are creating what's called a happening, right? And that theater has a plot, that theater has a narrative, theater has a beginning, a middle, and an end in a theatrical performance. And they would do something, like just stand up in a box and spout syllables, ad nauseum, forever, indefinitely, right? So there was no real plot, but it was a performance, and the way they were saying now that they're creating more interactive art now because the art was sort of breaking down that barrier between between the artist and the spectator, right? Now there's one particular phrase, quotation that is popular in Dadaism, and it's called "How to Make a Dadaist Poem." And what they say do is that you take a particular article in a newspaper, and you cut out all the words individually, right? And then shake them up in a bag, and then throw them on the table, and then whatever order they come out in, you just simply stick them back in that order, and it becomes, a Dadaist poem. And that might seem kind of, lighthearted, and that might seem a little bit funny and sort of frivolous, where at the same time they're making a very profound statement because they were talking about, in this day of mechanical reproduction, where, news is now being disseminated at an increased rate, that what you end up with that technology is in a sense nonsense, and you can't pick sense from nonsense. The same way, like now in our current age, you have fake news, and you can't tell unless you do some real serious digging what is real from what is not real. That's what they were saying was happening in the mass media, in the institutions. There was a breakdown of institutional integrity, right? There's a video by Lily Singh coming out from last year where she said that she wants to create a video on how to make a rap song by Migos. And I will show that video because it tends to follow this whole thing she's making up. She's with her group of people, and she's trying to make a rap that is made out of random words, right? That sounds like a Migos performance, and make and then make a video that has to have certain ingredients in it to make it a Migos, a valid Migos performance, right? So with that, like I said, these kind of things, Dadaism comes about by its as a result of artists trying to cope with the modern age, the irrationality of the modern age, right? Interestingly, in Trinidad, while going back to this big timeline, right, in this big gap here, right, where nothing is being documented, you have performance art taking place, but you have performance art taking place in the form of carnival, because you now have, after emancipation, like I said before, the image of Milton Prior, which I still have to put up and I haven't put up yet, and I apologize for that, but the image, while in this undocumented space from about 1880 to about in the early 1930s, a lot is taking place in Carnival, in the Trinidadian Carnival, but it's obviously taking place by people who aren't of, high social standing. But if you take into account all of the old mass characters that are being portrayed, they have a lot of, very profound, apart from just the aesthetics, they have some very serious connotations to them. You know, image, for example, like the Jabberlassie, right? The Jabberlassie means the molasses devil. So why would why would a African person paint themselves black and then cover themselves in chains, right? Cover themselves with black paint or black oil and then cover themselves in chains because they're obviously showing the plight of the plantation on them. They're showing how the plantation oppresses them, right? So instead of it being a costume, to be like a alter ego or another persona, it is really showing a heightened or accelerated reality. Okay, the red devil and the blue devil is a similar thing. Of course, using colors from the colonial flags, right? The red and the blue that come from the French tricolor or from the Union Jack, and you make them the devils because he's basically saying that this is the legacy of colonialism, right? These are people with no education, no training, but they managed to make these profound statements because they had a very passionate desire to explain, to visually try to articulate the situation, right? The Dame Lorraine. The Dame Lorraine is obviously a parody of the Master's Wife, right? So it obviously is a man, because what it also deals with in the whole carnival performance is the whole thing about inversion. So traditionally, the Dame Lorraine is actually played by a man, right, who is now dressing up as a woman, dressing up as Master's Wife, right, with the little parasol and exaggerated breasts and exaggerated buttocks and face made up with a big parasol and stuff like that, walking around very daintily, don't want to touch anybody, that kind of thing. And then you have other characters like the baby doll, for example. The baby doll is a woman, is a young woman carrying a child, a dolly, right, and looking for the father, looking for the absent father, right? Because obviously this is somebody who slept with her and then obviously slept with her and went the merry way afterwards, and the woman is stuck with this child. So instead of it being like I said, a false character, what you have in the old mass is actually a heightened sense of reality, right? So it's using performance to actually explain how things really are, right, to people who wouldn't notice otherwise in the masquerade. And what the masquerade was, that whole carnival thing, that whole canboulay thing, that whole celebratory thing, right, was an opportunity for the African slaves or now the workers on the plantation to show you how bad the life really is. Okay? So, and of course, this takes place, all this development, this evolution takes place in that undocumented time in Trinidad's art. Okay, so this is something that is something that is very, very, very profound and very, very elemental to Trinidad's art. But at the same time, what is equally elemental is the reliance on French realism that came from Casabo, right? And obviously, what Minshall did with River is try to bridge that gap between carnival and art by making artwork or making a masquerade that was so elaborately visual, that was so visually elaborate that it now, transcended typical carnival. It was no longer just a costume. It was a work of art that was performed, right? And this is something like Anissa is saying, that our art is carnival related. Now, what you also have in the art of the mid 1950s, particularly the work of Sybil Attuck, like I said before, you have pieces by Kodayo, who was creating pen and ink drawings of certain, and I must specify, non-Christian festivals. So he was doing things like Hose, the Chakti from Hinduism, Shango and Orisha and stuff like that. But he was also, but Sybil Attuck also came along and started doing paintings of Hose as well too, right? So that, again, even that bridge again between art and carnival becomes less distinctive because you know how traditional paintings that are focused on religious festivals and particularly non-Christian religious festivals. So this is not the religion of the colonizers. This is the religion of the people who have come, right? And by giving that type of recognition in the art, right, by people of the art society who were, from higher levels of our society structure. It was a sort of a recognition that, the artwork was now coming to terms with the wider population, right? And that way, the art started to gain traction. So not the relevance of the art was not just simply that the art society reaching out and making art training more accessible, but the subject matter began to include other people that weren't usually depicted before. Right? Is everybody clear on that? Does that make sense? Getting a uneasy silence right now. Not getting anything in life at all. Right. 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 So that the art, not just in terms of its training, but in terms of its subject matter. Look at that rule right here. I'll pass it to the screen. People. Right. Yeah. I have your names down as so I will take that off, and I'm hoping that other people, anybody who does not see this video, for the love of God, please tell them so that they can check in with me on via email, right, and see that they have seen this video, because I know that there about 2 or 3 people that haven't Xavier told me he need a job home. Where you know, Xavier? If you need a job home, the question is, where are you? Right? Right? And they kind of starting to whine a little bit. It's 27. Right? So I hope that right. I think I talked to my mouth with a fall off right now. Yeah, I'll wrap it up. What game y'all playing? God. Yeah, so let me just kind of do a quick overview again. We really went from Casabo, from Bridges to Casabo, right? We really dealing from the transition. Like I guess the entire lecture is really centered on the transition from the 19th to the 20th century, right? And to recap, people, this comments. Yeah, to recap, the real issue is that while you have a lot of upheaval taking place in Europe in that time, the late 1800s, I can say around the 1880s to around the 1930s, right? In Trinidad, what you basically had was just the realism, the traditions of the realism to Casabon, just continuing right on through until you reach 1930s. If you'll have seen the video, the website from the Society of Independence, right, it's an example of a still life by Hugh Stormare, and an example of like a sort of like a jug with some fruit and stuff like that, and that is very reminiscent to the work of Paul Cézanne, who was considered to be the grandfather of Cubism, and has some Cubist elements in it. But like I said before, even though the style of painting becomes a little bit more radical, the subject matter more or less remains the same. You still have your nice, beautiful still lifes, portraits, landscapes, people in the market, children, that type of thing. The subject matter does not change. So make that decision very clear. The painting style changes, but the subject matter in Trinidad art by the Society of Independence does not change, right? It starts to change a little bit around the mid-20th century, right, in the 1950s, where, again, like I keep on stressing, non-Christian festivals begin to be depicted in our art, right? And particularly the work of Cordayo, Alfredo Cordayo, and the work of Sybil Atek, right? You have Limbo, you have the Billy, you have all these other things that define us, but did not get recognition before because we our previous artists were painting pictures of churches and stuff like that, right? That is one thing. Then around the 70s, like I said, Leroy Clark. No, sorry, before you have the 1960s. And in 1960s, around time of independence, you have what's called a generation of 62 with Minshall, Jackie Hinkson, Pat Bishop, right? And even then, you still get you get more looser, more fluid styles of painting. But again, the subject matter is still the same: beautiful landscapes, portraiture, children, nice things, right? It's only when the 1970s comes around with Leroy Clark that you sort of get art that tends to be kind of yeah. Yeah, exactly. A little thumbs up will help just to say I got it nice to do that. Thank you, Xavier. Right. Um, the picture I can't see on here, yo. I really wish I could see I can see your faces right now. Right. As you're kicking and putting stuff online in the life. Yeah, I really I'm lifted up by the comments. Right. And it's a tedious session. I encourage you to bring snacks so you could actually eat and drink and whatever you want to do while you're while you're while we're doing this session, right? And it'd be really sad when the class comes to an end. It'll be really really sad because I was saying that as a class, I have this is really a class that I find a lot of cohesiveness, a lot of unity in the class, right? That I haven't seen before. I've been teaching this course since I've been teaching at UWIS about 5 years right now, and I've never seen a class that has as much unity and cohesiveness and togetherness. And I hope that you all manage to maintain that camaraderie throughout the rest of your years at UWI, and also hopefully beyond that. And I want to say, as a lecturer, as somebody interested in art, I want to be there for you all after you all graduate as well too, so we could work. We could continue to work together on something really, really big and something really, really special, right? That would be something really far out. With that being said, let me not get too emotional right now. Let me just try and stick with the matter at hand. And like I said before, it really is mind blowing that I come across a class of people, a class of young people that everybody is together, everybody is kind of unified, and everybody I think lifts up each other as well too, right? To motivate each other to get to this program. Yeah, yes, Shimon, he got back up real quick. Right, she needs the crew of Batman, no cry. Yeah. What you crying? You're crying after the exam, though. Anyway, anyways, thankfully that was sorted out. Um, yeah. So I was intending to have one session just devoted to the isms, right? Because the many isms of the early 20th century, even though they may sort of be seen sort of irrelevant to us, we do pick up on them later on, right? Particularly after the 1950s. A lot of the Cubism, the Impressionism, and so on, the Surrealism, all that tends to be become integrated in our art post independence, right? But again, you have to keep on asking yourself: is this just simply a follow fashion style, or is this the beginnings of something very, very unique and new and novel, and something that'll be relevant to us, right? What does happen later on in Trinidad's art is, particularly 80s and 90s, there, because of that sort of downward decline. Remember, I'll show you the graph. The graph anymore. I can't show you that downward decline that went on in the 1980s, right? I remember I said before, you have from 1930, right? go up, and then from the 60s it starts to go up, from the 50s it starts to go up really, really high. In the 70s it continues on that trajectory, and then when the early 80s, bam, it just all of a sudden falls down. And that also corresponds with the economy of China as well too, because 1983 is a very, very pivotal year in the sense that it was the American invasion of Grenada, which was sort of like I would say that it's a sort of a nasty awakening, because so from the 1960s to the 1980s, the Grenada Revolution was sort of well, at least the Cuban Revolution was seen by many intellects, at least in the intellectual space, and not what everybody's opinion, but in the intellectual space. It was seen, the Cuban Revolution and the success of it was seen as something that, that here was this little island off the coast of the United States that could stand up to this colonial power, right? And Grenada was following suit. And Grenada was a little bit more disturbing in the sense that because, Grenada was part of the English-speaking Caribbean, not the Latin America like what Cuba was. Because Grenada was part of the English-speaking Caribbean, right? There was a sense of that this whole socialist thing was coming closer to home. Jamaica also at that time in the 1970s was showing strong tendency to Norman Manley in going that affiliation as well towards Cuba. And there were conspiracy theories saying that the CIA changed all of that. But there was a conspiracy as far as the American invasion of Cuba of Grenada was concerned, because of the assassination of Maurice Bishop, it was felt that by the other Caribbean airlines, the other Caribbean islands in that group, and it was particularly the islands of the OECS, or the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States, that consisted of all the 4 Windward Islands and 4 Leeward Islands, right? Particularly because those other governments were concerned with the destabilization of Grenada after the death of Maurice Bishop, that they decided to invite the United States, quite frankly, to intervene. And one thing that Pat Bishop had said to me, as an intellect from the 1960s, he said that it was a time when her generation failed, her generation massacred itself, and that people saw it as a return of colonialism. Right? These are all, like I said, these are all opinions, these are all theories, these are not hard facts, right? But again, you don't see any art reflecting that. You look at, we looked at this at the French Revolution, and you could see that the art that was about the French Revolution around the time of the French Revolution. If you pull up art around Trinidad, say another traumatic time, the coup of 1990. You pull up art from 1990, you will see nothing about the coup. If you even pull up art from 1991, you will see nothing about the coup in the art. There's only one piece done in 2006. That was in the Catalog Essential, right? Where it has the surrender of Abu Bakr and the Muslimin. And that was done 16 years after the coup, right? After the attempted coup. So our art, for the most part, doesn't really seek to deal with issues. It doesn't speak to us, right? It isn't really giving us a voice. It isn't really voicing our issues of trauma, of difficulty, of except very few exceptions again. Caribbean Basin by John Stallmeyer, and Minshall and River by Peter Minshall, right? So I'll spend a bit of time trying to comb through, and y'all could probably remind me through the email or Classroom app anything I've missed, but I want to obviously put links to these works of art that I've talked about, right? And try to create a little bit of organizational structure as well too, so that we, I just don't simply put everything up at random. We will sort of put things into topics and discuss it, because there is some very good instructional videos talking about conceptual art and talking about the case, for Dadaism. There's something put up by the PBS broadcasting about Dadaism that, talks about certain genres of modern art and trying to make a case for it, because a case for conceptual art, right? And like I said before, these things only begin to gain traction and gain noticeability
and gain some intellectual support from the 1990s go onwards. What you have happening now in Trinidad is a little bit interesting as well too. I actually think in this climate right now that interest levels in art are kind of winning again. And there is because what has happened is that a lot of the avant-garde, the kind of edgy work that was considered to be avant-garde work, conceptual work from the 1990s and early 2000s, that is now getting very old. That is now moving from contemporary into antiquity. And for that reason, this is where we are right now. I mean, you all may be dealing with subjects, dealing with artwork, the traditional still life, the traditional painting of flowers, and you may be dealing with, sort of like work that's more kind of like, more like graphic art, and work that looks more like an Instagram meme or something like that, right? And that's considered to be edgy, and that's considered to be popular, and that's considered to be, on the cutting edge. But you sort of have to look at work out there, right? And I'm trying to expose you a little bit to the work out there as well, to sort of give you a sense of what is going on, in the wider world, so that you could try to hopefully see how our art. Yes, I said edgy, Xavier. Yes, okay, right. You can sort of see how our art, doesn't have a place in the outside world, right? Can it address problems that would be um, relevant and controversial, both inside Trinidad as well as the wider world as well, right? Why hasn't anybody created a series of arts about the COVID virus, for example, right? Why, all these kind of things? These are kind of questions because the again the question is who would like it, who would buy it, who would support it, who would want to write about it, right? But you have to kind of look at the rebels in art, and I think one of the first rebels was Courbet, because by painting a massive painting that nobody else would accept, and he knew that it was going against convention, he was basically, thumbing up his nose to the academy and saying that he was in a sense a better artist than them, right? And I know it takes some arrogance, it might take some, testicular fortitude, but are you the kind of will you be the kind of artist to do that type of thing, right? There's another thing that I always try to inculcate into people is that you have to know your art history. And there's a famous quote by Henri Matisse, who said that in order to break the rules, you have to know the rules. And there's another quote by Picasso that I want to kind of leave you all with, and he said you have to steal like an artist. And it's one of the things that's ironically Leroy Clark took with him. He said in an interview with Errol Fabian and Guile back in 2004, I went to New York to take, right? And he went to take in order to bring back to Trinidad, in order to, enlighten everybody, so to speak. And he said that, the whole thing about him leaving Trinidad is he makes the analogy to somebody going to search for fire. So he says that if you have a primitive group of people, the person has to go and find fire, then they have to leave the group in order to go and find fire, right? And when asked about arrogance, there was one other quote by Leroy Clark I want to leave you all with, and he said that can you think of anything more arrogant than the sun, right? These are some of the things that I have picked up along the way, to share with y'all, and hopefully, like I said, if y'all can keep the live feed going, um, I want to see the reaction that these statements have on you, right? Um, so what can I say? We come up to the end. It's about 2 hours and 15 minutes. Like I said before, I just been through a half a bottle of water right now with no snacks, right? And yeah, bars. What about bars? Well, bars are off limits right now. We have a virtual drink up. I can bring a beer next time, right? And knock back a couple in front of you. But I shouldn't because I have to be on my best behavior, right? As you can see the halo over my head, right? I have to be on my best behavior, right? Right. Any of y'all doing this right now in a group? I mean, are y'all and any of all of y'all watching this individually, or anybody have like a little group party right now? Like two or three of y'all together, huddled, together looking at this thing, or is everybody doing this separately? Individually. Oh, I gotta work with Kiramar. Don't groups not allowed. It's group more than it's groups more than 10 or 10 or more. Not allowed. Separately. Right. Right. So that is like I said, the essence of this lecture, right? Covering the transition from the 19th to the 20th century. Corona, real energy, yeah. La Corona, I have a big line. Yeah, I'll walk with La Corona bit next time. Just dinner by myself on the camera. I want to keep it that way. Right, cool. Right, how come it's up only up now up to 25 people? I mean 24 people, sorry. Right. Right, people. So, look out for posts during the week. Like I said, I hope that you'll have a lot of free time to actually watch these videos, because I want these videos to be watched, not just simply, you know, put up a style. I really want, if I have to put a marker in the timeline to the specific point to save you all the time, where I find the part of the video that is relevant, right? Particularly in the one, like I said, in the Banker's Guide to Art, because what the Banker's Guide to Art explains to you is the whole issue of the art market and how that evolved in the 19th century. Um, because before, you have artists were selling works individually. Right. Right. Yeah. Right. So that is all I really want you to get as far as the video on the Banker's Guide to Art. The video on conceptual art. I need you all to pay particular attention to that video, even though it's talking about art in general. What it talks about in the beginning is very, very clear, because what happens is that there was a very rigid distinction between what was art and what was an object. And when you start to have, because of photography, because of automation, and because of mechanical reproduction, you now have the ability of images to be reproduced accurately and very quickly. What looked like art, certain artworks became objects, and then the art now trying to take those things into consideration, the objects now became art. So that whole rigidity between object and art started to break down, and that is the essence of understanding conceptual art, right? Right. So, okay, so I guess that more or less wraps it up, right? We're good for today. I thank you all. I thank you all immensely for not just. Yeah, unfortunately, I've been talking to Dr. Tate about that, and that can't happen. We cannot gather to benefit from that. I can tell you that I can tell you certain books, certain references that are in the West Indiana section. I can put those books up. There's a name to the books, and I can probably put an Amazon link or something like that. But if you have those names of those books, then I don't know if you're still allowed to go to the library. Next thing too, I don't even know, because I know the library staff has to be there, right? The administrative staff, the library staff has to be there. But if you have the names of the books, that you could use those books as references for your essay and stuff like that. Obviously, I'm going to wait until closer to the end of the semester. Yeah, I know, it's a terribly long video. It's the most I've ever talked non-stop as well too. Right, thank you, Dene. Because usually I would talk for a couple of minutes, show a little video, then come back, right? Show the video again. We have a little 10-minute break, right? But I can't have a break of just getting up and going for 10-15 minutes, and all you're seeing is the wall behind me for the next 15 minutes, right? So in some ways, it's actually a little bit difficult on my part, and it's a little bit difficult for you all too, because. No, I mean, I also understand I have to try to engage your attention as well too, and I know that's a bit of a task to sit in front of something for 3 hours. Honestly, I mean, the only exception to that is an Indian movie. You know what I mean? But I'm quite surprised that that you all have stayed. I was saying as well too that by coming to my classes and doing my assignments, that you all are supporting me immensely. It's not necessarily I'm trying to support you as your lecturer. You're supporting me immensely by attending my classes and doing everything, right? And as well too, I want to try to give you all education that would be able to stand the scrutiny in any academic environment, not just simply UE, right? I did my first degree abroad, and what I want to kind of give you is a grounding that would allow you to, even if you had to go to art school abroad, that would allow you to have that information. What I'm saying, as I'm kind of like winding off in the final minutes, we as Caribbean people have a really difficult task. And it doesn't just apply to visual arts, but it applies to literature, it applies to every other expressive form. In that we have to be masters of not just simply literature or the expression of a particular country or a particular region. We have to, acquire mastery of that, right? So in order to be well versed in literature, you have to be both familiar with Shakespeare and everything else, right? As well as being an innovator in your Caribbean genres as well, with what people like Walker were able to do. And this is the thing with art as well too. You have to kind of know your European art history, right? Have that kind of unlock, but then again, know how things developed in your local space. And I don't simply mean, a very cursory meaning. You have to really have a really deep kind of, emotional understanding of it. And for that reason, that's what I'm trying to give you all. So you have to kind of know the traditional material as well as know the non-traditional material. We're kind of moving into stuff outside the textbook now because, I mean, the textbook is only going to deal with the mainstream kind of thing, and I could go to that as well too. And we start talking about modern and postmodernism and stuff like that. But the real issue in the Caribbean is and so you have to see Trinidad not as simply as Trinidad itself, but Trinidad as part of the Caribbean region and then part of the wider world, right? So on that note, people, hey, thank you all. God bless you all. Keep safe, right? Um, I really hope that you all don't get the virus. I'm trying my best not to. Toilet paper won't help. I keep on telling people the best thing to sanitize your hands with is not hand sanitizer actually. It is actually that carbolic soap, which you know as Lifebuoy, right? That old time smelly soap that everybody does, old people does use, right? That is probably the most effective way of sanitizing yourself and protecting yourself from the virus, right? Right? Who said, should you say what? I can't even like it. Let me put the emoji here. So, thank you all. Put some emojis in there too. What kind of the emojis come up? Right. Oh shit, that was one. Damn. On here. Oh, Jesus Christ. Right. On here. Let me try again. Look one. How do you all type these emojis while the video is going on, man? Sure. And yeah, bling as well too. And looking for one the face mask. Right. I just missed it. Oh, damn it. Right. Just a couple things to note. All right. Let me just say, because my wife is in the medical field, let me share a couple things with you. The reason why The reason why the hand sanitizer and the other stuff is not so effective, not as effective as the carbolic soap, is because the carbolic soap contains something called carbolic acid, which in order to sanitize a space properly, you have to what they call carbolize a room, right? That's where the carbolic acid is so effective. Now, um, bar soap is actually more effective because it contains fats or lipids, right? That break down the protective coat of a virus. So basically, the virus basically falls apart. Whatever is holding the virus together um, falls apart when exposed to these lipids that the bar soap has, right? Um, and alcohol and hand sanitizer kill bacteria, but they don't kill viruses. Okay, this is the next thing. A virus is not an organism. A virus is a piece of genetic code that is covered in a layer of protein, right? So bacteria are little organisms, little multicellular organisms that create infection and cause complications. But a virus is not that, right? That is why antibiotics are only useful if you develop bacterial infections that come out from the virus later on, right? But anyway, enough of that rambling. Stay safe, people. Yeah, life boy. I'm typing that on you. The red one, right? People, it was really good to see you all. I'm glad to see so many of you all in one virtual space at one particular time, right? I can't thank you enough for staying on. I really, really can't thank you enough for staying on. Send me WhatsApp, right? Right, so we're done. We're done, and I'll be in touch with you all during the week, right? And next week Wednesday, same bat time, same bat channel, right? Probably do a little preview video before that. There is a conference tomorrow, like I said, dealing with official ways of dealing with it, and I'll see what happens then. I don't know if I'll be able to. Well, I mean, this YouTube platform is available to us because I got permission from YouTube to go live, but I'm not so sure if what will happen next week. But I will keep you informed. All right, so people, so long, farewell, and thank you again. Right? Okay, love you all. Thank you.